What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the great Michael Eisner debate. Tonight is going to be a different episode of Distory because Kate and I, who don't always see eye to eye, are really not going to see eye to eye as we do a little thing called a debate. Kate and I are going to be debating, was Michael Eisner a good CEO or not? Or maybe just good for the Disney company or not. Hey, Megan, how are you? What's up, Jackie? Let's see if the one and only Cicerone is on. Hey.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. How are
Hello.
you?
Nice
Hello.
shirt.
Oh, yeah. The difference between mine is yours is backwards, though.
I know. I guess we'll have to fix that. Ta-da.
Historians unite.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah,
going to let him win. Don't worry, Christina.
your ears are spectacular. And first of all, whoa, hang on. Whoa. Whoa.
I was
Whoa,
just
whoa.
responding to Christina.
Whoa. No, that was a plant. That was a plant already. You're rolling in.
Thanks,
I
Becca.
won't let him win. First of all, this is a spirited conversation. Winning.
No,
No,
it's
but
all
that's
in good fun. Everybody
yeah,
knows
yeah, of
it's
course,
all in
of
good
course.
fun.
I also think, in the spirit of being thorough, this is probably one of the most thoroughly researched episodes for me ever. I have copious notes. So,
Yes, me too.
oh, you wrote yours in like a.
I always
What
write
is
mine.
that?
That's my
Do you really?
document. Yeah.
What? Wait.
Yeah.
What is all that? Is that a book, or is that
It's
just
my
for tonight?
research. That's
That's just for
actually
tonight.
that's what it looks like every week. You just don't usually see it. I just
Oh
do a
my
lot of
gosh,
research.
dude, you're so organized. Holy
Well,
cow.
you know what? When we did, I'm kind of mad at myself because when we did the Haunted Mansion, I wrote it all in a notebook. And I'm like, this is silly because sometimes I'm out and about and traveling and I need to be able to write stuff wherever I'm at and research and like reference it. And so I'm like, I'm going to do everything now in a Google Doc so I can pull it up no matter where I'm at and have all of my details. So that's what I do
Super,
now.
super smart. I
Yeah.
love that. Make sure you're backing them up though too, because I don't trust the cloud. I'm
Will do.
serious.
Put them on my
Yeah.
computer. Yeah.
Yeah, this is actually a throwback cup. People are noticing. This is like one of those vinyl cry cut cricket cry cut. A friend of mine made way back in my
Smart.
Instagram days. It's a cup with like little confetti that actually will change colors. So like all these ones are white, and then these ones, when it gets cold, it changes color. But yeah, my Instagram friends
Allie.
made this for me.
That they're all saying mine's more legible. It is. I actually had a hard time reading my handwriting too, and I'm not like a horrible handwriting, but like this is makes it so much better.
Well, listen, I usually have at least one of these filled out and probably 45 tabs open on my computer normally.
Yeah.
But this one, there's less like visuals and more
Yeah.
just stuff. Like there's just stuff.
Yeah. I have like a
Lots of
couple
stuff.
visuals, but they're not like, it's just more to show everybody what we're talking about. So,
Yeah, like when you start bringing up Roy, I'm gonna show pictures of him where he looks like a rat. So, oh, the gift. Should we open gift first
oh my
before we
gosh,
get
I
into?
have to go get mine. I left it down on the stairs. So, yeah.
Okay, I
let
gotta
me go
get mine too. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. All right, all right.
We'll
All
be
right.
right back.
All right, here, ready? I'll entertain you. Yes, I can't believe now that she's gone. You're right. I am gonna win this. Just kidding. She can't hear any of this anyway. But tonight's completely different. Kate and I are going to be debating whether or not Michael Eisner was a good leader or not for the Disney company. I'm sure she has a different way that she's framing it. But yeah, there's quite a bit, quite a bit. All right, let me grab mine. I was entertaining them when you were gone, so I I was entertaining. So now it's your turn to entertain.
Yeah, I'll have to do this so you guys can't see my address. I should have thought to cover it up before now. But my whole house smells like cake because my son baked a cake, which is really fun, kind of on his own. So that's fun. I need scissors.
Okay. I did not open this, but I did remove Victoria's address, but not mine.
I
So I
didn't.
just,
So I'm gonna do mine off camera just because I don't want people to see the addresses for me or
yep,
Victoria.
yep.
Yeah. Mine does have like a dented corner. I think I can show this part of it. Uh, the whole corner got dented.
Okay. I am open. You let me know when you're
I need a
open.
different pair of scissors. This one's not working.
Eisner was not the hero we wanted, but the hero we needed. It's too early for this. All right, we're in gift mode. We're in gift mode.
We're gonna do gifts
gift
and then we're
mode.
gonna do Eisner. I promise we got
Fragile.
lots on Eisner.
It must be Italian. Yeah, I already took
Almost
off. I already took off all the stuff except for my business. So business fine. I think it's fine. Whatever.
Okay, let's see. Okay, I've got the top open.
Okay,
You ready?
I'm ready.
I'll put it down here.
If it's a severed head, I'm going to be very upset.
Can't
Classic
show that on a
Angela.
live.
No, you can't. Newspaper. It's crumpled newspaper. It's just what
I
we
got a
always
lot of
wanted.
bubble wrap, which is
Yes.
good because since mine is dented. Good job, Victoria.
Oh boy. Okay. This I already know.
You know?
I already
I don't
know.
know.
Oh, you don't know?
I don't
Dude,
know.
I thought you knew Disneyland.
Come on.
Get real. Are you kidding me? You don't know what this is yet?
Well, it's like 2 sticks. Come on. I don't know. I'll know.
They're
Oh, no,
not
I'm gonna.
2 sticks.
I didn't look
Do
at
you
them that
hear this?
closely.
2 sticks? This is not 2 sticks.
Oh, okay.
This
Okay.
is not 2 sticks, lady.
2 sticks.
I know immediately. And now if you look at the top gives it away.
What?
So,
What?
so let me just say, I have had my
2
eyes
sticks.
on
I look like
one of
candles.
these when they came out last year or the year before. But yeah, it was like
Oh
a
my
brown copper
gosh.
one. But I gotta admit, the brown copper one is trash in comparison to this one.
This
So it is a
amazing.
haunted mansion gargoyle tiki mug, and the 2 sticks, mon frere.
Okay, I know, but I'm like looking at it. I'm like, it's 2 sticks. It is 2 sticks,
Nope.
but they're.
Nope, it is not 2 sticks. It is everything.
This is so cool. That's amazing.
This is not 2 sticks. This is like the greatest thing ever.
You guys are the best.
And there are little lights. Okay.
Oh no, I dropped something.
So I am a
Room's just filled with
huge.
packaging.
Well, I mean, I think Kate, you are in the same ilk as me. Obviously, you're a Haunted Mansion fan, but huge tiki culture fan.
Yeah.
I've been collecting
So
tiki
cool.
mugs for a while from Disney. So this is one that has been eluding me for quite some time. But check how cool that
They
is.
pull it out. We pull out the little tab. Mm-hmm. Ooh.
And then keep those tabs because I bet that's like how you turn it
You
off.
turn
yeah.
it off. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're gonna want to keep those tabs.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how you turn it off.
Ooh.
Mine's down here. I gotta do one more. I'm missing one.
How cool is that? This
is
is like
so
the greatest
cool.
thing ever. And then on the back, like, because you're wondering, like, well, how is this actually a mug? Well, you can actually drink out of this bad boy's head. So
I'm
one of these
thinking
days,
it would make a really fun like succulent planter because you could put like hair on them. It'd be fun.
I'm thinking about drinking liquids out of it, like its intended purpose, and you're making it into a house plant.
It didn't break. Yeah, I don't know. Well, because I could put it on my shelf. Like I've got this.
I know,
like,
but you
silly
could put
little
them on
plant.
your shelf anyway. Like that's what I do with the other ones.
Well,
It's not like
it
I'm
won't
drinking out of
fit.
them
It
every
would have
single
been
day.
so
but-
cool to put. Doesn't fit. This is so amazing. Thank you guys.
Gargoyle, chia. Yes.
Thanks,
This is
Victoria.
okay. So I don't think you understand the gravity of this. I have to tell you this. This is like a 1-day only sale. Shoot up to like $600, like but anywhere between $300 and $600 on the internet. Like they
That's
are
crazy.
insanely
You gotta be real
overpriced
careful.
because they're so crazy. Yeah, this is like of all the tiki mugs. This,
Wow.
the Jack Skellington, and like 3 others are like the most coveted. So
Wow.
thank you.
She
Thank
says
you,
they
thank
were
you, thank
sold
you.
out
And
by 6:10 a.m. And she had to click clack.
That's what I'm saying. Like I'm
That's
trying to tell
amazing.
you like how special this is. Like this is
I am
one of the
floored.
most
That's
special things you could possibly
amazing.
ever get.
Oh my
And for a Haunted
gosh.
Mansion and Tiki Room fans, like this is right as rain.
This is so great. This is amazing. Thank you. Thank you,
All
thank you, thank
hail the
you.
Tiki Grail. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And
It needs a Santa hat. I don't have I have my big one, but he's too big. We just cover the
oh, you got to get like a little
like a
tiny
little
Santa hat for him now.
mini
Yeah,
Santa
like
hat.
right there.
Yeah.
I love the green color. It's so cool.
Like aged. It's great. And it's got little like the little skulls down
And
here.
you can actually, so the fun fact is if you did keep those tabs and you didn't lose them, they will fit when you put it back in. So
Yeah.
you won't
I
lose
kept
them.
I'll put it in now just so it doesn't.
It's just a couple of sticks. I don't know
And
what
it's
these
kind of
sticks
like
are
it goes
for.
with my Christmas decor. I mean, we're gonna Christmas it up.
does.
It's nice and green. So
Yeah, I'm not,
the kids are gonna be like, "What
kid
is
you,
that, Mom?"
I kid you not. I had my eyes on this, and I already had feelers out. So I just thank you.
It's amazing.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Wow, what a cool surprise. And I'm really glad mine didn't break because that corner looked pretty iffy. So
Name them. Ooh, I don't know.
name them. Oh my gosh. I know I already have Kirk. I have my unbroken one downstairs, but I keep Kirk up here for inspiration. he's a little broken.
It's the broken one,
the broken-
which is, I mean, not that
So then we can put him side by side.
not that unique or different from actual Kirk. It's just my arm's hanging off by a wing.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
So
thank you,
appreciate
everybody
that.
who made this happen. And Victoria, I know how annoying it is to pack up things, but they came out perfect, absolutely perfect. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Kirk's drinking out of the mug. Kate is dressing it up. True.
That seems accurate.
This goes perfect with my Hatbox Ghost tiki mug, which a lot of my tiki mugs are in storage, so I don't have that one physically on me here. I do have the Nutcracker Skipper one here, but yeah, I
I
love
don't know
them.
if I can use it in a mug. It's like, I mean, you could.
No, straw, lady.
Oh, it's straw. I was like, this is
Straw.
weird. It's gonna
You-
poke me in the eye.
It hurts to drink this much.
It's worth
No,
it.
not a good idea. Not a good idea.
Oh, it's great. I love it.
Thank you.
Put it on my shelf now.
I really, truly, thank you. Yeah, I know. I have to put him, like, immediately hide him. Okay. Let's put, for now, let's put
I'm just
him
going to
here.
put him here. I'll have to reorganize the shelf a little bit.
Yeah.
For now, he can hang out right there.
Yeah, I can't put him in the spice rack. That's not going to work. But I do have a display case
Spice
that he's
rack.
going to fit in.
Oh,
So stinking cool. I mean, they doesn't
Hang
get
on,
any
no.
better than a Haunted Mansion gargoyle. It just doesn't. Doesn't.
oh yeah,
A bat
Bridget, I haven't
stanchion.
left for Disney
Bat stanchion's
yet.
up there. Bat stanchion would be. Eventually, I have to buy
Yeah.
a bat stanchion.
I have the ring holder one that's on my
Yeah.
table downstairs. So I have a little tiny one. Yeah, I leave for Disney Monday. So this is our regular Distory. Well, I'm going out with a
Right,
bang
right.
before my trip. We're going to talk about Eisner.
Right. So for anybody who caught yesterday was us just using TikTok to go live and pre-record a show that'll actually air on YouTube next
Thank you for
Friday.
that gift, Rhonda.
So, so yeah, you just caught an early episode, and we just were we didn't tell anybody about it. We just did it
Yeah, I know.
because the timing worked out, and
Surprise!
then yeah. But tonight is very specific. So, I mean, I guess is it about
do
that
it.
time?
Let's do it.
Welcome to another episode of Distory. With me, as always, is Kate, the Disney Cicerone, and I am Kirk from Walrus Carp. Tonight's going to be very different from our normal nerdiness. Well, I mean, it's still going to be nerdy, but a little bit more argumentative nerdy. Kate, why don't you tell them what's going on tonight?
Well, I titled this.
Oh, great. You titled it. I'm already
I
in
was like,
trouble.
I'm going to take out some of my words from it to make it more fair. Let's say Michael Eisner, hero or villain. I think is
Oh.
a fair.
Oh, let me. I need to know the. Let's hear the director's cut.
Why Michael Eisner was a terrible CEO, hero to villain story.
Well,
So,
yeah, that's a
I'm
lot.
trying to make
That's
it
a little
more
bit
fair.
more. Yeah, that's
It's
a little bit more
biased.
biased.
Yeah, so I'll try to keep it to
Here,
more
I'm
fair.
going to paraphrase that title. Why Michael Eisner is a doo-doo head and I don't like him.
No, this is not personal. This is just facts. Facts. Facts based.
Ooh,
Research
facts.
based. Do you see
For
all my
once on
research?
this show,
For
it's
once.
research.
So, for those of you who don't know, you probably know already if you've been with this Distory long enough. Kirk and I love to debate things in a friendly way. We're absolutely still friends after all these things, most of the time, probably. But for this, Michael Eisner has been kind of a point of contention for us for a long time because we sit on opposite sides here. I sit more on the side of Michael Eisner was not great for Disney, and Kirk sits pretty much on the opposite side that he was great for Disney's progress. So we have a lot of research and a lot of facts and a lot of stuff to debate. So buckle up; it's
I
gonna be great.
I didn't come up with like a good framework of this, so I kind of feel like I don't know what the right way to do this is. I mean, there's chronological, some time, I take some time, and we just keep on building off of each other.
I feel like we should
I
do
don't.
it a little bit chronologically just because it will help people understand, especially those who are not familiar with Michael Eisner and what he did. And of course, that will probably lend to you looking like you're coming out on top first, but it's okay. I'll end strong.
Why is that though? He's like a villain, right? Why would I look like I'm on top? I thought he was terrible.
Well, he looks great in the beginning, but looks are
Oh,
deceiving. So,
oh, he looks great.
yeah.
Okay.
Doesn't mean he was great, just means he looks great.
Oh, well, he didn't do great things here and there. Okay.
No, well, no, he didn't.
Oh, you're such a trash person. All right. So,
Okay.
okay, I think we need to talk about the worst thing that could have happened to the Disney company, which is Walt passing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Should we start there?
Yeah. So Walt passed away when 1966 was when Walt passed away.
1966, yes.
And it really did kind of throw the company into a bit of a turmoil of, how do we move forward? Roy really carried Walt Disney World's opening. He was the only reason that still went forward. There was some debate about whether or not they should even keep going with that project, but Roy was very much like, no, we need to do this. Was like his legacy. Like, he wanted this, I'm going to do this. And it pretty much did him in. Like, after Walt Disney World was complete,
Yeah, he passed like what, 6 months later or something after the opening.
yeah, like,
So
right.
that was like
They
his
both,
last piece.
yeah. So it took everything he had. He was pretty old at the time too, but it just really, they both passed right around Christmas time, which is super sad. But so Walt Disney World got completed, and then after that, do you have more research on this part? Because my research is more after Eisner came.
Well, I mean, so really, there's a couple of quotes from people during that time period where it was relatively rudderless, at creative direction, especially where they were acquiring various IPs and just like really struggling with not knowing what to make. They had like one good thing. I will give in their animated department, Robin Hood was good,
Yeah,
great film,
but it
great
was
film.
largely used from other animation that they just kind of like redid.
Yeah, it's like there's pieces of the Jungle Book that's in there, and they just reframed things, which is fine.
They
I
did it to
actually
save
think it's
money.
very, yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think it's very passable as well. But yeah, there was no creative direction, and the greatest gift for that company to be successful still, or like relatively, even though it started on the decline and decline and decline, was the fact that even Walt had passed away, and kind of his legacy or the ghost of Walt was kind of directing the company for, from 1966 all the way until 1984. I mean, we do get
Yeah.
CEOs, but they get ousted as well,
Yeah, it's
and nobody
largely
of
like,
like, yeah, go
I
ahead.
mean, because there were so many Imagineers that were still left that worked directly with Walt, and they knew how he would want it done. They asked that question a lot, like how would Walt do it, or what would Walt
But
have
that's
wanted.
but that's the problem. That's one of the biggest problems that I have with the Imagineers, because the Imagineers and Walt disagreed quite a bit. And Walt, one of his I think greatest strengths is the importance of how good the finalized consumer facing whether it was an experience, whether it was an attraction, whether it was cinematic, or in any direction that was, that final product was so important. And Walt constantly always had his hands in making executive decisions on very minute, small details. And like he was very particular about
Yes.
things.
He was, but he was brilliant in his creative direction. He was really he had he could see things that other people couldn't, but they were like things that once they came to pass, people loved them. So his creative vision was so unique in that way, and he was very people focused, and he was very like a quote that I love from him is Disneyland is a work of love. We didn't go into Disneyland just with the idea of making money. He was very much of like this was something he did for the people because
Yeah.
he loved it.
Well, so okay, I have another one, and I want to show a picture. This is like one of the few like pictures I have, and we're still in Waltz right now, but it's just his attention to detail. So when it goes all the way back to, oop, I didn't mean to pop that. Oh, did I lose it? Hang on. There we go. For me, it goes back all the way to Frontierland in 1955 when John Hench was frustrated with Walt Disney. And they were arguing about a final piece, the stagecoach straps. No matter what John Hench could do, he couldn't get the straps to what Walt wanted. And finally, John Hench says, "Why don't we just leave the leather straps off, Walt? The people are never going to appreciate all this close up detail." Walt's response came to be reflected in every Disney attraction that followed. And he communicates by saying, "John, you're being a poor communicator. People are okay. Don't you ever forget that. They will respond to it, they will appreciate it, and they will keep coming back to the park again and again and again." And the result, John Hench made the best darned leather straps a stagecoach has ever seen.
He did that with so many things in the parks that like I think we've talked about before how he had a, $50,000 chandelier that you're eating at in like, virtually a quick service restaurant. Like he was all about quality. He was all about doing things really well. And he was like, if you build it really well in high quality, eventually like the money will come. Like he was not worried about money. He was like, let's just build it really well for the people. So yeah, that was Walt's vision. I think you and I agree a lot on Walt. So
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah.
But I see a lot of. I can't even say it with a straight face looking at you. I see a lot of similarities to the way that Eisner ran some of his creative direction as Walt
I'm sure
Disney
you
when it
do.
came to micromanaging.
I'm sure you do. There's a significant difference though. There's a significant difference between the way
I
Michael
can't wait to
Eisner
get
does it
there.
and Disney. Okay. Yep. He never
So
cut
at
corners.
this point, right? So the problem with Disney is that there is no Disney. They need somebody who's creative. They need somebody who's an idea man. They need somebody to help direct this because even with a crew needs a leader. It needs somebody to get behind so that finalized products can move through. It's one thing to have an idea, but you need somebody to continue through the ideation. So that is when we finally get the CEO and president of Paramount Pictures gets pulled and instated by Roy E. and is it Sid Bass at the time? Bring in Eisner in
So,
1984.
yeah, which is ironic. It's ironic that Roy was the one that brought him on. But he didn't bring him on alone. He brought him along with Frank Wells as well. It was the two of them that he brought on. It was not just Eisner. It was like Batman and Robin, like these two powerhouse, bringing them on together to be a voice. And they outed Ron Miller. They kind of like
Ron
kicked
Miller,
him out.
correct.
Yeah, which was of
Yeah, so
course Disney
So yeah,
family.
so we have with Frank Wells, you have great pedigree of upper leadership in Warner Brothers, and then the pedigree of Eisner is that he was the CEO and president of Paramount Pictures. The reason why, like from there was 8 years that Eisner spent at Paramount Pictures, and he put out movies like Saturday Night Fever, Grease, Beverly Hills Cop, the show Cheers, and a big one, Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark,
Yeah,
which is
I
going
think
to
he
happen a couple of
understood
times.
he understood more adult entertainment, like not adult entertainment, but like more centered towards adults versus children. I think that was part of that decision making, was that it was like, we have to make this balance between children and adults, so it's not just geared towards children. So I think that was part of that. But yeah, so he brought both Frank Wells and Eisner came on together. This is 1984 that we're talking about here. And the dates really make a difference in this debate. Dates make all the
Yeah.
difference.
Coincidentally, I was born in 1984. So the year of
Me
the
too.
Eisner, I was born. Oh, wow. You were born in the year of the Eisner, too? You're an Eisner? I didn't realize
Yes.
that. That's
I'm
so
not an
crazy.
Eisner. You can't call me that. Ew. No. Well, I mean, if anything, that tells you like a lot about this conversation. The fact that we can debate this, but we were born at the same time. We're not even different generations. Like we had the same childhood growing up in Disney, and yet
Right.
here we stand.
I feel like a lot of this is going to be us taking cheap shots, but like good, quipped cheat shots it makes it fun.
Pretty
So.
much.
Yeah, so 1984, we get Michael Eisner coming in. And the thought is that the pairing of Michael Eisner as CEO and then Frank Wells as president will be this like good, almost. I hate to make the parallel, but a lot of other people did of the time. So I'm going to just use the contemporary, that a lot of people thought that this could be the resurgence of a Walt and a Roy, somebody who's more fiscally responsible and somebody who's more like creative and independent idea wise. But both were
Yeah.
good producers as well from their picture time. And the other thing that Michael Eisner had is he had a pedigree as well in ABC as well. So he
Yeah.
had been networked through quite a few like media production companies, which is going to be important and significant to understand where kind of the where this happens. I do have something that happens before this, though, just before he gets reinstated. Most people don't know that in 1984 there was a hostile takeover that was an attempt to actually purchase the Disney company. So
Which is what
think about
triggered
this
all this.
for
Yeah.
just a second, right? So in 1984, Saul Steinberg, who had made his money leasing computers and then ended up owning an insurance company, was going to purchase Disney, who was on the decline but had all of these great assets together, so the stock price was really low. What he was going to do was going to buy the company, so basically purchase all their earning share, so he owns the majority share of the company, and then he was going to sell it all off. So Michael Eisner is put in place with Frank Wells to turn the ship around. So basically, shareholders and the board agree that that's a better situation than selling off the company, which would have meant that places like the Magic Kingdom, Disneyland, Tokyo Disneyland, and Epcot would have all been completely separate, independent parks if they got sold off and split. They may
Well,
not.
Tokyo
They might
Disney
be
already
like.
was. It was operated by an outside company anyway.
Right, but like the licensing, it would be straight licensing now for all of them, which is a
Right.
weird thing to do, you know.
Yeah.
And the other Tokyo is weird too because it has some governmental ties as well. It's not just an independent company, so it's a
Yeah.
little wonkier.
So when Eisner became CEO, he insisted on being the face of the company. That was really important to him, that he be the face of the company. It was not something that virtually anybody wanted him to be. So he was going to become the host of the Wonderful World of Disney. He wasn't a performer by profession, and the studio management didn't believe he could do the job. They actually called him and said he came across as stiff and awkward, but he insisted that he do it anyway. Even his wife said he wasn't doing a good job at it and he shouldn't do it, and he said, "No, I'm going to do it anyway." There was unanimous criticism for him being the face of the company because of how awkward he was on camera, but he decided to do it anyway. And then he loved the attention that he got. Because he loved the attention that he got, he really wanted to be seen as the face of Disney. A lot of people said he wanted to be Walt Disney, and that's why he chose to do that. So that was like, he immediately stepped in that role of like, I want to be known as the face of Disney.
Well, so here's the purpose of that. So first of all, Wonderful World of Disney, we know, was that amazing Sunday presentation where Walt would come into everyone's homes and tell them basically what is going on with the parks, what's happening in the world, and then obviously introducing some sort of piece, or maybe it's animation, maybe it's a feature. Sometimes they would put actually films out directly on TV. In this case, because Disney, almost everybody felt that like without Uncle Walt on the TV, what is Disney? Like without the Disneys, what is Disney? And it's not like Roy E. stepped up into that position and took a charge as an actual Disney. So that's the reason why Michael Eisner ended up stepping into this role. A big part of what most
Was it?
people will complain is that Michael Eisner has a giant ego and he just wants to be known
He
as like the
does. He
man and the
did.
dude. Okay. That's a fair. I understand where you're coming from, but I think the truth is that there needed to be some sort of visible leader so that people could react to that in a way. And yes, he was horrible and awful at first, stiff, awkward, quirky. But I'm gonna be honest, like all those. Anytime somebody told me that I was like not going to be successful in something, and if I actually listened to them and didn't do anything, like that would really stink. So I hate to say, when somebody makes a criticism of you and you do it anyway, that's not a bad
Stop.
character trait. It's not a bad character trait. So he actually realizes how stiff and awkward he is, and actually hires a. It was a senator speech writing coach
Michael
so that he
K.
could, yeah, so that he could start becoming a little bit more comfortable on camera. And he does become more comfortable on camera. He becomes more of a character. He interacts a lot with the animations, and so much so, and he certainly does become renowned as the face of the company. So that plan does work, and so much so that when he's in the parks, and he was a huge fan of the parks. Kids would ask him for his autograph. So it is successful in, I think, its purpose.
Okay. Yes, I would agree that some having someone that represents the company is good, but I think a lot of people were uncomfortable with the fact that he was trying to step into Walt Disney's shoes in that way. So I mean, I don't like that personally. Like I'm like, ugh, that doesn't feel
Well,
right.
here's the thing. Nobody can be Walt Disney.
No.
Nobody, right? So like maybe it was a poor choice to continue Wonderful World of Disney and it should have been a different show. Maybe that was a poor judgment call, but I think because that show had been running for, I don't know, 30 something years without stop, it's kind of like why would you? And there was only 1 year buffer when they were outing Miller that the show went off air. So I understand they probably should have made it a different show so that it wasn't exactly like a I'm trying to
Yeah.
step into the role.
A different
But
show or a different person. He could have just designated somebody that was better on camera for that role. They could have had a face of somebody that
well
wasn't him. He just
they
wanted it to be
attempted they
him.
attempted a couple of people. It was like Dick Van Dyke screen tested for it. There was a couple others when I was reading about it. So you're not wrong, and they definitely certainly were looking to go a different
Dick Van
direction
Dyke would have
necessarily.
been great.
Yeah,
I would have loved that.
yeah,
He's
could have been.
great. Just saying. Okay, so let's move on from that. We got a lot more to cover. So this is now the revitalization of Disney in this era. We with Frank Wells. Very important point. With Frank
Wait,
Wells,
wait,
they
wait, wait. Hang on. Can you say that part again? What would you say this is?
I would say it's the revitalization of Disney with Frank Wells. With Frank Wells
Right. Well,
and
yeah,
Jeffrey
of course.
Katzenberg. Jeffrey Katzenberg and Frank Wells are the reason why we had the Disney Renaissance. The Disney, like, that's
Oh,
the
wait,
Disney
wait,
Renaissance.
wait. You used a different phrase. The Disney
Disney,
Renaissance. A
Disney Renaissance.
Renaissance is a rebirth, like
I
a
literally,
phoenix from the ashes.
sorry, it's,
And
my
also,
porg is
like
making noises.
I, I know.
I
What was
lifted up
that?
my porg.
Oh, your
Just
porg.
started-
See, this is distraction porg, kids. I will not be distracted. Here's the thing: you're making it seem like the like Frank Wells did everything, or that Michael Eisner
Oh,
is just like a bum amongst a team, right? And,
well, we because later we find out what he's like without Frank Wells, and that's why.
well,
That's why
well,
he was the
there's
one. who tempered all. These are just pictures from the Disney Renaissance, by the way. There's Frank Wells was the one who tempered all of and took away and filtered all of Michael Eisner's really bad ideas, and also kept him more balanced, where he would actually listen to advice and let. So
Here, ready? I'm going to give you a solid minute to just go, and then I'll retort, because otherwise I'm going to be flagging on the play like every 20 seconds. Go ahead. I'll just listen.
No. So it was a combination of Frank Wells and Jeffrey Katzenberg. So Jeffrey Katzenberg was the one who basically was responsible for all of the Disney Renaissance movies we know and love. So everything from Little Mermaid and Aladdin and Lion King and all the things that you think of as the Disney Renaissance. It was because Jeffrey Katzenberg was in charge of those animations, and Frank Wells was balancing out Michael Eisner's horrible ideas, because he had a lot of horrible ideas, and even Imagineers will say like his ideas were crazy, and they always had to try to like bring him back to something that was actually good. So I think that all of the good stuff in this time either came from Frank Wells tempering him, or the ideas of Frank Wells as well. I don't think it was just like, it wasn't, Frank Wells was not just the finance guy. Like, he really, like, they worked alongside each other to balance each other's ideas. And I think that when he lost Frank Wells in a helicopter accident in 1994, that's when everything changed. You can see it in the movies that started to be produced after that time. There was a couple years when the movies were still good because they were still in production before Wells passed away. It also was when Jeffrey Katzenberg left. It was horrific when he left for the company, because it was a very public battle. Basically what happened was, when Frank Wells passed away in a helicopter accident, Jeffrey Katzenberg had been lobbying for that position as president of the company for a very long time. And so he assumed when Frank Wells passed away, he would be put into that position. Instead, Eisner absorbed the position, made himself president and CEO. And Jeffrey Katzenberg was like, what? And so he left to go help form DreamWorks, which is like one of Disney's major rivals. So Eisner also refused to pay Katzenberg his contractual bonus, despite Katzenberg's offer to accept $60 million as a settlement, which was way less than owed. He took him to court, and the court ruled in Katzenberg's favor. So it was a super public battle. Eisner called Katzenberg a lot of really ugly names that I can't even repeat here on a live because we'll get banned. And it was a very ugly time. And it was because Frank Wells had passed away, which was the side that balanced Eisner. And suddenly we had this and then Katzenberg was the one that was helping make all these films we know and love. And suddenly they were gone. So this 1994 is the turning point for Eisner's time in Disney, because we lost those two people. I'll let you go because I know I've been talking long. So go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
I agree. Jeffrey Katzenberg is integral to being a success during Eisner's time as CEO and chairman. He brought him from Paramount, though. Like, he brought Jeffrey. You get that, right? Like, they worked together, and he brought him over. Like, I've done that before when I've worked at other companies. Like, anytime that I've had really good...
He didn't want him to have power over him. Sorry, I'll stop. I'll write my notes. Go ahead.
Write your notes, lady. All right? So, I understand the concept that... Listen, the guy was the head of Paramount when he came over. It's not like Jeffrey started out as an assistant, then moved up his way in the ranks and became one of the I forget his actual position when he finally left, but needless to say, Jeffrey wouldn't have even been at Disney unless necessarily Eisner had brought him over, right? But to say that he had all these horrible ideas and that only Frank Wells was the only person to reel him in, and then he like turned into a madman, I feel like is a little bit of a characterization, because he always needed some sort of balance. And I'm going to bring this in. Walton Roy had a very similar, okay, that's somebody's drawing of him as Two-Face, right? Like, okay, I could draw that picture of you and be like,
sorry,
Kate is Two-Faced. It's yeah, but that's just like somebody's depiction of it. I think people are they gloss over the very very end and they forget that this company was straight up going to get bought out and sold, right? And during the first 13 years, the company's revenues went from 1.65 billion to 22 billion. And I don't want to just talk about numbers here, but numbers are an important part of a company's growth because without growth, a company dies. Michael Eisner. That's a Michael Eisner quote. Uh, first, and then the valuation from the company from a shareholder standpoint went from 2 billion to 67 billion. But let's get back into like having crazy ideas because that's a big paramount thing is that like Michael Eisner is a kook and has like wild ideas. Well, there's two things I want to bring up. One is a Michael Eisner quote, "To punish failure is yet another way to encourage mediocrity." And mediocrity is what fearful people settle for. So he was not afraid to take some major creative risks, which let's talk about Walt Disney. Has Walt Disney ever made some really creative risks that really flopped? How about that crazy smell-o-vision theater that they installed in places that was so expensive and it flopped miserably? It was horrible, right? But really advanced, really unique, great idea, just didn't work. The implementation wasn't there, right? How about the fact that Roy's like, dude, you can't spend money on a spire on the castle, but I got to go on vacation. And then, oh, he pops back and Roy looks on the top of the Disneyland castle and what's there? Walt just built it anyway and spent the money. So to say that one person has some like crazy ideas and needs somebody to reel them in, I think a lot of larger characters need that. And the other thing is, they used to have something that was called the Gong Show. And the Gong Show were these large meetings with all sorts of different level leadership and ideas or Imagineers. And they would literally sit there and throw every single crazy idea. In fact, one of the ideas for a long time, and it never happened, was this concept of building the Disneyland Hotel, which was going to be almost like a Colossus of Rhodes. So like imagine a giant Mickey Mouse with like its legs spread over the highway and then the hotel would be 43 stories high. It never happened because their architect was like, dude, where are you going to put the elevators? And then it ended. But really unique, interesting idea that clearly would have been a standpoint for a hotel and what it looked like. I'm not going to get into the accomplishments yet because I need a diatribe for the amount of good ideas that he has had more than the ideas that have been bad. So to like, just so that, like there are a lot of ideas that everyone said were bad and they are awesome and they're still awesome today, or they're on the decline because people didn't foster those ideas or innovate and they actually are dying now, but they were major successes. So I have a lot of them, like an endless amount. So,
Okay.
But I'll give you some time.
Okay. I will. One of my main arguments. I have two main arguments for this debate, so I'm going to lay these out before I keep going. One is all the things we hate about Disney started with Eisner, and I will make all those points this evening. And the other one is the only good things that happened, like I said, were because of Frank Wells and Jeffrey Katzenberg. So 1994 is a key date because a lot of the good things that happened. And another thing that I will also put in there is that Michael Eisner, a lot of the good things he did, if they were considered good, because I wouldn't consider most of them good when they happened, were because of his jealousy, his ego, and his wanting to be on top and competition with other people and take things away from other people. So I'm going to argue in this that his motivation behind what he did is a lot of the reason why I say that he's the villain in this story, because I think motivation matters. So let's go back to some of your points. You talked about how he hired Jeffrey Katzenberg. Okay, yeah, but when it came time to hire him into a position where he would actually have power over what happened, he didn't let him have that position, and he left. So he refused to put him in a place where he had the capacity to challenge him. He did not want Jeffrey Katzenberg to have power. And so even though Katzenberg was the one that made all of these films possible, he didn't want him to have any power. And so instead he made himself the CEO. And then when he did and president. And when he did hire a president, he hired his friend, Michael Orvitz, who was a disaster, lasted only a year, and then was terminated with $100 million worth of stock options and $38 million severance pay, which like was financially devastating to the company. I know that was the decision that Eisner made. So when we're going to talk about revenues, I have to tell you that this, yeah, there's a reason. There's a reason why there was revenues. Let me make sure I find the right spot here for that. He implemented raising ticket prices. So if you're angry that ticket prices go up every year, it was because of Eisner that that happened. They were actually still quite inexpensive before he came on board. And then he realized that they could raise ticket prices, but people would still come. So that's what he did. And I actually have a chart showing that. You can see that in 1974, the price was $7.30 for admission. And then as we get, and then as we get to 1985, which was right, Frank Wells was still there, right? That's when they started implementing this. It was $16.50. And then 1995, year after we lost Frank Wells, it jumped up to $31 per ticket, and it has been climbing ever since. So if you don't like high ticket prices, you can thank Michael Eisner for that, because they were affordable before he became in office. And I also mentioned you talked about, okay, so we're talking about money.
What years were the big price jumps?
The big price jumps happened in 1985. So that was the right after he became where he is. And then 1995, so right after we lost Frank Wells. That's where the biggest price jumps. And then after that, after he was gone, it only went up by like a couple dollars at a time. But every year he was there was significant like price jumps almost every year. So another thing about, if we're talking about money, so we had that, remember that quote that Disney said, Disneyland is a work of love. We didn't go into Disneyland just with the idea of making money. And we just talked about this. Like, well, it was all about like, don't focus on the money, focus on the project. So here's what Eisner said. He said, we have no obligation to make history. We have no obligation to make art. We have no obligation to make a statement. To make money is our only objective. End quote. So he was all about making money. And that is when the Disney dream, so to speak, I believe, began to die. And the company became about greed and money instead of making something beautiful. So, and I will touch on Fantasia before I give you the floor. You mentioned Fantasia as an example. I would say that while the project itself didn't do well in theaters for a number of reasons, not just Fantasound, it also sparked a lot of imagination for a lot of other things. So we see bits and pieces of Fantasia not only in a whole bunch of other animations, but also in a lot of attractions like the Haunted Mansion. So it wasn't lost, so to speak, even though it was a really big dream. So I would say that Fantasia wasn't a complete failure in that way. And I'll let you talk.
Okay. 1980s. What's happening in the 1980s? Greed, Wall Street, product of the times. Shareholders became more important than customers. That is a product of the times. That's not a product of one person. Shareholder value over customer value was pinnacle at that time period, where profits always were most important. But here's the thing. Even though you use that quote, and I feel the way that you're referencing it's first of all, it's in a shareholder meeting that quote is from. But
doesn't matter. He still said
it. That's fine. But like, I could say a lot. I think the context does matter, because he's speaking to people who actually care about profits, because those people are caring about their actual stake. So I think that's a little mischaracterization. And the timing, of course, is a part of that as well. The most profitable movies start coming out during this time period as well, right? And that is not necessarily a product of fiscal irresponsibility or budgeting. In fact, when they were making Ariel, which to me is the start of the Disney Renaissance, right? So like, even though we had Great Mouse Detective, we had Oliver and Company, it's really not until 1989 when The Little Mermaid comes out. And when they were doing Ariel, like actually drawing her in and inking her, instead of making her 11 colors, they made her 7 to save money, right? So like there are times where there was a lot of fiscal budgeting to make sure that things could actually flow. And to say that they have no obligation to make art, but yet they made some of the best art during that time period. I'm just gonna do. I mean, I have so much. I don't even know where to start. Let's just do animation. So animation, they won 11 Academy Awards, and a lot of them are in music, right?
Yeah.
You get Great Mouse Detective, Oliver and Company, Little Mermaid. You get Rescuers Down Under, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King, Pocahontas, which Lion King was in the top 10 grossing films and still is until the remake came out. Hunchback, Hercules, Mulan, and Tarzan, right? And it's not until we start getting into like the like early 2000s that animation kind of takes a little bit of a slump.
Yeah, why was that? Why did that
Well,
happen?
but it already had like to
Why
me
did that happen?
if Frank Wells, right? Like Frank Wells was still around when they were working on Hunchback, Hercules, Mulan, and Tarzan, and I wouldn't say that they were any of those were commercial successes until after the fact, right?
Um, well, Hunchback came out in 1996, so he
Yeah,
was 2 years already passed by that point.
yeah.
He might have had some things to do with it. Hercules was 1997, so that's 3 years after he passed. So I'm saying probably not. Not a lot of creative input probably by that point. So I'd say the last one he maybe was heavily involved with was James and the Giant Peach. Toy Story was in there as well, but gosh, Eisner
Well,
almost completely blew the Pixar deal. So I don't think we
well,
can count hardly
it's not
hardly
well,
anything for
not
that.
okay. Hang on, time
Oh,
out, time
he
out.
was Steve Jobs
So
hated Eisner.
yeah, but that's because Steve Jobs and Eisner were like the same person.
Yeah,
So
but what?
both of them were creative and unique and very strong-willed people that cared a lot about what the end result was, and they did not. They just didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things. But got to remember though, like you're discrediting the fact that Pixar even happened. Like that historic $26 million deal with Pixar, which brings us Toy Story in 1995, the very first full animated feature, computer animated feature ever, forever, right?
Yeah.
No, that happens way later, and then we get Bugs
Wait, wait,
Life.
wait,
You
whoa,
get
whoa, 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 whoa. No, no, no. That happened with Frank Wells still there, with Jeffrey Katzenberg still there. Hey, that happened. It was in production while they were still there, and then after that, that's when he like couldn't cut a deal with Steve Jobs, and they almost completely lost their Pixar partnership.
well, their distribution, that's only because they stopped communicating with one another because they thought that it was going a different direction. But they still had the distribution rights all the way until 2004 when the renegotiation comes in.
You know, they did. They had a 50-50 distribution agreement, but then they almost lost it, and because Michael Eisner and Steve Jobs couldn't see eye to eye. Like he couldn't negotiate well. He wasn't good at being a compromiser, a negotiator. He wanted things his way, and he wasn't gonna. And like Steve Jobs, pretty much the same guy. I agree with you. They probably were very similar people, but that you have if you're going to be the head of a company, you're gonna have to learn how to compromise and figure it out and make it work, because we almost lost Pixar because of Eisner. We didn't get Pixar because of Eisner. We almost lost it because of Eisner. I would
You
say
no
we got
no
it because
no.
of his
See,
partnership with Frank Wells. Is so critical. That 1994 date is so critical to this conversation because
but the fact that you're discrediting the fact that Eisner is there, like you're just you're honestly
he's there with somebody who's making him good.
your biggest argument is that Eisner doesn't even really exist and until after 1994. That's really your biggest argument.
No, yeah, well, he represented, like, I'm going to say who he really was came out after 1994. Who he was before was tempered by somebody else who was a little bit more rational, a little bit like maybe he talked him down off some ledges, also convinced him like maybe let's go this way. They were well known to be that pair where they kind of tempered each other. So he lost that side of himself, so to speak, and then like his real self came out. And I think it's his real self that we're debating here. I think you can't just say like oh, well, he did all these great things. Like, he did them alongside somebody else who was really helping guide his decision making. And we can't just like discount that. And I
Well,
honestly, the animation really, Jeffrey Katzenberg, huge to the animation. We would not have gotten those movies without him.
and who
So,
brought him on board to the Disney company?
alongside Frank Wells, like they probably made that decision together.
Still brought him on board.
He brought him on board, but then he also got rid of them, which then almost like led the
Yeah,
company down
I
a bad
listen.
road.
The one point I will yield, just being a leader in other things, when there's an opening like that, like why would you not? But there was I don't have I was trying to find the one quote I had. There was a quote from Roy E. Disney about his distaste for Jeffrey Katzenberg as well, and talking to the board, and I can't find it, of course. So to say that it was entirely him, I think Roy is a very checker. I need to do a
He
lot more
did.
research on Roy E.
Yeah.
He seems like a really Roy E. has an interesting past. I don't know enough, but based on what I've seen, he has his own skeletons in the closet.
And I will say, yeah, I think Roy E. didn't want him in that role, Jeffrey Katzenberg in that role. I think that was part of it. Was there was probably some of Eisner probably also being like he probably used that as an excuse. He just didn't, because even if he didn't put Jeffrey Katzenberg in that role, the fact that he made himself that role, no, like no. He didn't want anybody to challenge his decisions. He wanted to have complete power over everything. There's no excuse for him not installing somebody in that position, even if it wasn't Jeffrey Katzenberg, who pretty much, I think, earned it by that point with all of those films that he made. I think his
I
leadership
agree
decision, that was
with
just
you.
bad.
That was a horrible misstep on his
Yeah.
part. That's probably because that probably would have changed directionally at least the last part of his tenure for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go into some more accomplishment things, and you can chalk it up to the team. But guess what? Like if you don't chalk it up to the team during Walt's era too, I think you would be doing a horrible disservice to say that Walt created everything, and that's not fair, right? He put people in a position to be successful, and I think Eisner, out of all people, especially when I read that failure quote about like they literally would all meet in a room and throw ridiculous ideas against the wall, and if everyone agreed on it, then it would actually get pushed to the next level. Otherwise they would get gonged because it was such a ridiculous idea. So it wasn't just him that was coming up with, and that thought of like being afraid to take creative risks, I think can't be undermined, because there's some things that the Lion King musical, right? Disney didn't enter musicals until under Eisner's era, right? And it still is the best-selling musical of all time on Broadway, right? And they even when they did the Beauty and the Beast musical, they brought in Imagineers and theater production people from within the theme parks to design the costuming, right? So that's directly taking the theme parks and putting it onto Broadway rather than just like hiring out a bunch of Broadway people. And it was critically so well received as just a great Broadway show. So okay, Broadway, we get into here are some of the other things. This is the media conglomerate that Disney is happens because of Eisner. It doesn't happen because of Iger. It certainly isn't happening right now. ABC gets acquired, Fox Family gets acquired, ESPN gets acquired, Muppets gets acquired, Touchstone, which was a horrible, horrible film production that was trying to be adult under the Disney empire, gets completely turned around. Pretty Woman, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which I want to go back to Roger Rabbit in a second. Good Morning Vietnam, all happened under Eisner. Looney Tunes
Before
and Felix.
1994.
You still can discredit. Like I have other things that happened after '94. Okay, so let's not don't get too hung up on '94. It might burn you in the end.
Oh,
So just
no, I have done my research.
so let's talk about Disney princesses. Before Eisner, how many Disney princesses do we have?
Well, it was it Jeffrey Katzenberg that brought those in for the animation, though.
It
So,
doesn't. It's still a
how many
part of
great
the
ones do we
like,
have after 1994? Like,
did Walt draw every single one of the characters, right? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, all you want to do is just push it to somebody under the team. It's still under the lineage of somebody who's running the company, okay?
They
Because
weren't.
the
So like
great
he
things,
also lost a tremendous amount of animators because of his poor business decisions over the year and his cost cutting. He was known for cost cutting. You mentioned Ariel. He was known for cost cutting virtually everything to try to save a buck. He was all about that money. So
well, it's
and
I
it
will say
drove
this.
Imagineers out over time because they saw the decline in the quality of the content that was coming out.
There is a healthy balance between having a budget and then blowing a budget. The things that they blew budgets on weren't typically animation because the rate of return on animation was so paralleled. If they had like a $40 million budget, they would get like a $300 million return. Where they almost always went over budget were on the theme parks. But the theme parks at the time when Eisner took over was 74% of their overall business. So being over on the theme parks, which we have to talk about, like this is so paramount to me as a theme park person, right? So like you can Jeffrey Katzenberg me to you're blue in the face about animation, right? That's fine. That's totally fair. Okay? And but he was brought on, and the only reason why he knew him is because they worked at Paramount. So that's not it's totally you can't just dissuade that. And good people make even in your eyes a terrible leader look great.
Are
So
you okay? Are you honestly putting your argument on what he did on theme parks? Is that where you're gonna go? Because
this isn't one part of the argument. Have you been listening? This is like a layer cake. Like this layer cake has
like a
multi. There's
parfait.
icing. There's like delicious white cake. There's also some chocolate. There's some yellow cake in it. We got it all. It's we've barely touched. All right, let me just do the parks and then I'll stop talking for a while and then I'll come
There's so
back and
much with
talk
the
some more.
parks. The
Yeah.
parks are
So I'm just going to
biggest.
talk about park openings, and then you can bash the parks all you want, and I'll come back. All right. So before Michael Eisner's era, we had four theme parks. We had Disneyland, we had Magic Kingdom, we had Epcot, and we had Tokyo Disneyland. During Eisner's era, we get 9 gates. 9 gates. Okay? As a theme park enjoyer, those gates wouldn't be open unless Eisner pushed them through. And even if there were horrible blunders, horrible, awful, he didn't understand the culture. I know where all this is headed. I get it. I understand. I understand. But without opening those gates, we wouldn't have those parks to today, and all of them are profitable. Here are the parks that we get. And this is in non-sequential order because I was just writing them down, and then I looked for dates. So California Adventure. This is all like Common Day. Hollywood Studios, DAC, Typhoon Lagoon, Blizzard Beach, Tokyo Disney Sea, Disneyland Paris, Walt Disney Studios Park, and Hong Kong Disneyland. I'll stop, and you can now go.
Okay, that's a lot. Let's. I think we have to start with Disneyland Paris. Euro Disney was what it started as, which opened in 1992. But it was one of the very first things that he like signed on to do. I think that he personally, I think that he saw oh Tokyo's there. Let's do another like park that's somewhere. And he had his mind set on Europe because Asia had already been covered. He really wanted a park under his belt. So he went against the advice of experts. They recommended building in Spain, but he insisted that they do Paris. He's like, no, we're going to do this in Paris. And the experts were like, don't do it in Paris. The weather's better in Spain. It's a better place because it will be a destination. It's not close to a major city. Do it. And so he ignored them and he did it anyway in Paris. It was his pet project. He also shunned in-house designers that were part of Disney, and instead he hired a whole bunch of international hotshot architects and designers, which were very expensive and argued a lot, so which raised the cost significantly of the whole project. He opened one park but 7 large hotels with it. 7. Mind you, Disneyland Paris, Euro Disney at the time, was at the end of a train line from Paris. So it is like a one-day park for people from Paris. And that is if they wanted to go to it. But they did not. They wanted nothing to do with it because it was not, they despised this park. It was so poorly marketed. It was, he did not speak French well. Even the opening ceremony is so cringy because he just doesn't know how to speak French at all. The French nationalists just berated this park. They didn't serve wine in the park, so they didn't understand the cultural significance of wine in parks because they was just modeling it after what happened here in the U.S. But wine is very significant to French culture, and they had to have that in the parks. They also it was considered a half day park, so having 7 hotels for it didn't make any sense. So he completely thought was trying to make it into Walt Disney World of Europe, but there wasn't enough rides and attractions in the park to support that. It was just way too small. It was an economic catastrophe for the company. It happened during a financial recession in France and a labor strike. They had debts of $3 billion within 2 years of opening, and they really couldn't do anything about it. Disney finally purchased the park outright in 2017. But that's a long time. Eventually, it became the top paid attraction in Europe, but only after they spent billions of dollars adding stuff to it. And the second park that they added was so bad, people called it the Six Flags over Paris. It was so low quality and cheap and not done well. So it wasn't even considered like a great second gate. It was just awful. And it was a huge blow to the ego for Eisner. So I think it took away his love of theme parks. And it also almost bankrupted the company, so that everything they did after that, they had such huge plans for other parks. If we're going to talk parks, they had plans for Westcott instead of DCA. They had plans for a beautiful, gorgeous, even better than Epcot on the West Coast, Westcott. That Tony Baxter refers to Westcott as the greatest disappointment of his Disney career because it didn't get built. They could not afford Westcott because of the disaster of Michael Eisner's bad decisions in Euro Disney. That's why we got DCA. And DCA was horrific. Bad. Really bad. Financial disaster. People didn't want to go to it. You cannot discount that. It was so bad. The reason why he wanted it California themed. And this is a theme for all these parks now. There's a lot here. I have so much for each one of these parks, but he wanted it California themed. This is something Michael Eisner did because he wanted to compete with what was ever already there. So for Paris, I'd make the argument he was like competing with Paris itself. He was always kind of like, I don't know if he was jealous of the other places, but Universal Studios, that's why we got Hollywood Studios. He pretty much just stole somebody else's idea and then tried to make it Disney and then tried to draw crowds away from that place because he's like, we're Disney, we can do that. He did that with Busch Gardens Tampa. That was what Animal Kingdom came from, was from Busch Gardens. So he was just trying to, because they had all of their animal stuff come out. The Busch Gardens Tampa Bay came out in the early 90s. And he's like, oh, well, we can do that, but do it better. And so that's why we have Animal Kingdom, was because he was jealous or wanted to compete or whatever was in his mind, that let's just steal their idea and do it. That's why we have that. That's why we have MGM. That's why we have downtown Disney area Pleasure Island. That came from the Church Street Station in Orlando. He wanted to draw those crowds away from there and keep them on Disney property. Virtually every park you can think of, California Adventure also has, it's all California themed. So he totally, I can't even get into how bad California Adventure was because people who lived in California didn't want to go to see California, and it's a locals park. He wanted to turn it into a destination. There are people that go to as a destination, but will forever be a locals park because of the way that it's built. So I have so much other things about California Adventure, and I have a million other park facts, but maybe I'll give you a little chance to talk before I get into more of them because I've been talking for a while.
No. And I think this is good because I get to hear your perspective on things. And I do think some people are characterizing that I talk more about the accomplishments of the Disney company as a whole and not necessarily a character piece on Eisner, but his leadership is what allowed these things to create. So there's a lot that goes into this, right? So first off, like stolen ideas. can we put this one to bed? Stolen ideas. Walt stole ideas all the time. He went to Knott's Berry Farm and stole so many ideas for the attractions and then implemented them in Disneyland. There's how many of the
But
movies are based on literature that were from Europe and during his travels and brought over here and then put to life through his animation. I'm not saying that those things are. Everyone has inferences and you take from little tiny pieces from other places. And listen, I am a Busch Gardens fan, and I said it this morning that I think it's actually a better park than Animal Kingdom. So it's kind of funny that it came across before, and then Eisner kind of used it. But here's kind of my thought process on let's start with Paris. Paris, the biggest blunder there was not calling it Disneyland Paris and understanding the culture 100% correctly. However, it was a requirement to step foot into Europe, and that was the largest municipality that made sense to actually put a park. It had a rail line. There's a lot of like features to put there. Were there too many hotels? Sure. Yeah, there were too many hotels. And were there missteps in the beginning? Yeah. And even you could talk about this about other parks. Like either they didn't, the rides were not that great. It was kind of whatever. I mean, Disneyland when it first opened was kind of, it was good, but was it great? Like we saw how there was no continuity with the IP of the characters with Mickey. Mickey looked like a horrible gargoyle with razor sharp teeth. And Dumbo ride didn't even work, so they had to put like a Dumbo character out there to like just draw away from the fact that the ride didn't even work, right? So like my point is that it got the ball rolling into these other markets where they were not existing in, and then it got fixed and created. I mean, the cement wasn't even dry in Disneyland, right? And people's heels were getting stuck in it. Is that great?
asphalt,
No, but
but
okay, whatever. Same difference. So it's not the same difference. But the point is that like nothing is really perfect. And still, even the parks right now, we could debate openly ad nauseum about the problems within the parks and where the park direction is. But it still is the parks need to legitimately exist, right? And we wouldn't have had these gates. You wouldn't have even. So I understand with Westcott, and I want to get back to Tony Baxter because you're utilizing one thing where Disneyland Paris was his bread and butter jelly jam. Like he loved Disneyland Paris, and I think we can all. Never mind. I'll get to that in a second. DCA, and yeah, I think Westcott would have been so much cooler if they had built Westcott. They didn't build Westcott. They built DCA, and I forget what it was originally called. It was like Disney California something adventure land, whatever. And it basically was like a crappy fair and not great, but it utilized space. It blocked out other competitors for coming into the market and utilizing that land effectively to make it into another theme park. And then they start resurging and changing, especially when their IP starts getting stronger. So it's to me, and right now, the way that DCA does their food festivals and they're more worldly, like you guys get, which I love, and I say you guys meaning because you're like West Coast, I'm East Coast. I love that you guys get the Chinese New Year festival. I think that is such a cool, unique festival that we don't get any of. It's like we just gloss over it, and we have Epcot. Like we don't
wild.
even care. Yeah, it really bothers me because the food, and I think DCA does have elements of Epcot in it, even though it wasn't its main intent at first. So maybe there was some missteps, but getting into water parks was huge. Let's get to Disneyland because we'll still do parks. I think you need to do more parks and I'll do more parks. But let's go into Disneyland. So they ended up introducing wine after they got horrible criticism saying, why is there not wine here? That's a part of our culture. It's not derogatory or anything. It's not going to be like people are just they won't drink like Americans is basically what they were kind of saying. But the big thing with Disneyland Paris is we get a castle that's actually made, and I know it made it more expensive, but they didn't make a fiberglass castle. They instead made it out of actual bricks and stone and super, super costly. It like blows the budget. But we also get the coolest Space Mountain ever that's like steampunk. And Tony Baxter has said not only is it his favorite castle, but it's also his favorite Big Thunder Railroad, because if you're going to make it 3 times, you should at least make the third time something spectacular. And we also get in the Disneyland park, because there is this uniqueness of American philosophy, we do get our Frontierland Haunted Mansion, which was a completely different take on the Haunted Mansion as well. But Tony Baxter, huge fan of Disneyland Paris. Even though he didn't get Westcott, he still get to build his Mona Lisa of the castle and also Big Thunder Railroad.
I'm just looking up a list of the opening day attractions for Disneyland Paris. I'm trying to find one because I don't think all of those were actually there
I think Space
when it
Mountain might have
opened.
been later, but Space Mountain was open during Eisner's day. So,
Yeah, I feel like some of it came later because there was a lot of additions they had to make to it to fix it essentially so that it would stop being a half day park or like a small park. Um, I don't know. I don't think I can do this on the fly.
yeah,
Okay,
I don't have
so
I'm trying to find dates for you.
okay, so Space Mountain didn't open until 1995 there. So
Eisner era.
almost, yeah, so years after. So they had to add it. It opened in
After
1992.
Frank Wells.
They added in Indiana Jones in 1994. No, Frank Wells was probably involved in that before he passed away. Like, how are we going to fix this? They 1995 Space Mountain, and then they had their 5th anniversary in 97, and they started adding things. They in 2002 they added the Studios Park, which was like a huge disaster when it first opened. That was still during his tenure, and then Buzz Lightyear was then later. It said they started to add Buzz Lightyear and Tower of Terror and all the other things. So they started to add rides later to Disneyland Paris. It was not, it was, it was not what it is now when it opened. And actually, there was a lot of people that said it was very cheap in quality, even though they use these like expensive like decorations. Yes, it's a beautiful park because of all these architects tried to make it compete with Disneyland Paris. You know, like this theme of competition. But they also used a lot of other things that were cheap building materials and cheap methods of building things. And like I've been to Disneyland Paris, and I remember going when I went on Indiana Jones, I was like, this is so weird. It's just like this outdoor roller coaster. It reminded me of Six Flags. I was like, because I was so used to the Indiana Jones that was in Disneyland, and I was like, what is this? Like, this is so awful. And it just was not what I expected. And I know I hear you saying like Indiana Jones happened on his tenure, so I can hear that in my head. But let's talk about some of the other things you said.
I mean, it was. I mean, he brought Indiana Jones to. I didn't even get into Star Wars yet, so how much time you got?
Yeah, yeah. Well, so let me get back to my notes. Sorry. So let's talk about California Adventure. I think you have to talk if we're going to talk about some rides. We have to talk about the Superstar limo.
Oh yeah, that is ridiculous. I'll agree with you. What a horrible attraction.
Which is like a fever dream for most people. We're like, did that actually happen? Because it was so bad. And what happened with that was they originally designed a ride that was like Rocking Roller Coaster. It was going to be this like high speed roller coaster where the paparazzi were chasing you, and you had to like escape them to like sign the deal. But then what happened was Princess Diana passed away by all the paparazzi chasing her, was like, in the car crash and the awful things that happened. And they realized, oh, we can't do that. Like, we just can't. We can't have it reflect anything to do with that disaster. No, we're not going to do that, which thank goodness they did that, because that's terrible if they just move forward. But the Superstar limo was, instead they made it like a very slow moving attraction through Hollywood. And it's like the Imagineers pitched this, and they're just like, there's no way this guy's going to go for this because this is awful. They chose like a whole bunch of corny jokes about LA culture and Hollywood. And they also had a joke in there that I don't know for sure if it's Eisner that put this in there, but they had a joke that was where they said Dream Jerks Animation instead of DreamWorks Animation. And it was pulled before the ride went out, but it was like a jab at Katzenberg. for leaving and starting DreamWorks Animation. So can you imagine like this like kind of toxic joke inside a Disney attraction that happened on Eisner's watch? And then, so they had it was made of cheap cardboard cutouts and like celebrities that they had the rights to use their faces, but they didn't even make them audio animatronics. They made them like, I have a picture too. They made them these kind of like weird puppets.
Yeah, like there was Joan Rivers, there was Regis Philbin, there was Melanie Griffith, Antonio Banderas, Cindy Crawford, Tim Allen, Jackie Chan, Drew Carey, Cher, and Whoopi Goldberg.
This one, he's just like waving money at you as you go by. And so it was like a horrible ride. It was horrible. This is what it was like cutouts. So if you think of California Adventure, if you're familiar with the park, this is now where Monsters Inc. is today. And they
Which
pretty
I
much
love that attraction.
they kept,
So
yeah,
good.
they did. It was a good change when they made it, but again, like they had to do that. They had to fix all of Eisner's mistakes. So, but I thought this was fun. You probably recognize this sign. All freeways jammed.
Yeah, all
Yeah.
freeways jammed.
So you can think of like that's now where we got Rock and Roller Coaster later. Like came from this attraction. It was only open for what, like a year and a half, 2 years, if that. It was closed pretty quickly, and so this is like they just overlaid the Monsters Inc. doors on top of this. So this was like behind it. But the sad part is there's a tunnel here somewhere. I don't know if you can see it in this picture. That somebody actually like passed away on like a week before opening, and they just left it in and they didn't do anything about it. And so people were like such poor taste to just like start capitalizing on that. I can understand it's like hard to fix that within a week of opening, opening a new park. There's already so much going on, but a lot of people are like, that's really in poor taste that they left that in. So
That's a tricky timing though.
oh,
You
and I
know.
have this. This is what it looks like, Rock and Roller Coaster in Disneyland Studios, the Studios Park in Paris. So it's very much like, let's just slap some sign on the front of a building and call it good. Other things you said, we talked about the stolen ideas, and you mentioned
I
Walt.
cannot wait to talk.
No, but I gotta cover all the things you just said. So, the parks, that Eisner created. Granted, Walt Disney did make his park, and it was near Knott's Berry Farm, but he was friends with the person who ran Knott's Berry Farm. He was not in competition with him. He was like, they shared ideas back and forth. So it wasn't just like he stole Knott's Berry Farm's idea. He really made his own unique idea. It wasn't just a copy. So, but Eisner really did make these parks within about an hour from all these other parks so that they would lose business. It was very, very strategic. In fact, he was going to make a park that was called Disney's America. That was proposed in 1995, so right after we lost 1994, 1995. It was never created, but it was going to be a patriotic theme park called Disney's America that would be in Haymarket, Virginia, and would have cost $650 million. It was roughly 30 miles away from the Manassas battlefield for the Civil War. And the company loved it because it was near DC and it was like near a populated area. But the people were outraged that they would build a theme park near a significant historical site where people actually passed away. It was like, we're going to capitalize on this historical event of a war. And
Did you see the park? The park looked awesome. I really wish they would have made it. Seriously, as like a historian, I would have loved it. It would have been so cool.
Well, yeah, but the point was he was trying to draw the crowds away from a historical event place and all the things in DC and the Smithsonian's and bring them to his park instead. So the whole thing that it just because of the negative headlines, like Eisner gave up on the idea and realized it was a horrible idea and gave it up. So I'll let you talk for a little while. I got more, but go for it.
Okay. Attractions are horrible under Eisner. Attractions as horrible as Splash Mountain. Ugh. Star
Oh, I
Tours,
got Splash.
disgusting. Terrible. Alien Encounter, awful. Nobody liked it. It was too scary for kids. Ugh. Maelstrom. Ugh. Thank gosh they turned it to Frozen, Test Track is terrible. It never has a line. It's always a walk on. It's an awful attraction. Terrible, terrible partnership too. Tower of Terror. Oh my gosh. I really, honestly, I feel like they should just throw that thing down. That thing is really trash. It's the worst ride ever. And just talking about rides in general, the first trackless vehicle ever being under Eisner in Tokyo Disneyland, that Pooh's Honey Hut, terrible. Who uses that technology anymore? That's so dated. Nobody uses any trackless rides. Awful. It's terrible. So yeah, you're right. Nothing really good happened during his era with when these attractions opened or any of the creative behind it. Which Tower of Terror opened way after Wells, but Fantasmic. That's an awful show. I'm glad they didn't bring it back, and everybody was so excited when it came back. All right, enough with the sarcasm. There's a lot of great attractions that get built. And once again, I told you, it's all about the foot in the door. It's all about creating the space that they can then retool and rework. These are the laying foundations, right? Laying foundations for, you can't tell me that Disneyland Paris isn't phenomenal now. Disneyland Paris is phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal.
Now it
and
is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying is you can't say
then.
that Disney. I'm
Not
saying
because of
is
Eisner.
the space
because
wouldn't
of
exist without Eisner. The space would
It
not
could have
exist
existed
without
in
Eisner.
Spain.
Okay,
been more
sure.
successful.
Okay, well now we can. It could have existed on the moon. It could have existed in the bottom of the ocean in the Marianas Trench. It could have existed on the Great Wall of China.
Huge failure. It's now a success because other people had to fix his mistakes. The point is not is it successful now. The point is, did he make it successful? And the answer is no, he did not.
Am I going to get a chance? Am I going to get a chance to talk without you talking over me? Because I sat there like a good little boy waiting for my turn.
I'll stop. Go ahead.
Okay. The point is that he created the parks. He created the space. He allowed the space to exist. And even when MGM Studios opened up, one of the coolest things that I think anybody would agree is that studio space was phenomenal. And the biggest reason why that even existed is similar to the reasons why Universal Studios in Hollywood and then you also have Florida is because of just the cost of doing business, right? So if you go and you think about if they were going to build more studio space, so making that an active studio space in Walt Disney World's property that they owned, super, super smart, fiscally responsible. And the thing that I loved as a kid was being able to see the actual animators right there in front of you. I thought that was like one of the coolest experiences because it really kind of brought you back into the animation studio, which I absolutely loved. I feel like you're going to want to talk more about the parks. My biggest thing is that we got more gates because when Walt was alive, when Walt was alive, we had one with another on the way, right? So, but before Eisner, we had 4. Now we have an additional 9, including, and we have not even talked about Hong Kong or Tokyo Disneyland Sea, right? So my point is that we've had 9 parks. After Eisner has been in power, right? Like he's no longer there. We've gotten 1 park. We've gotten 1. We so desperately need more gates. It's ridiculous. Or expansions amongst the gates that we already have. So I know you could say it was a disaster, it was terrible. Name somebody else during their tenure that opened 9 theme parks. Name them. I'm done.
You done? Okay. How many of those parks were successful during his tenure?
How many of them are closed now?
How many of them were successful? How many of them had to be rescued by somebody else because of his cost cutting and his cheapness and his poor ideas?
I would say so. Are you asking me a rhetorical question, or am I?
Yeah,
supposed
I'm not.
To respond?
You don't have to answer. So, Animal Kingdom will be Animal Kingdom. Let's talk about Animal Kingdom. Okay, one of the gates. It doesn't look at all like they had planned. They had to reduce it down so much because they had lost so much money on the failing park in Europe and the cost of the animals were so high because they they didn't realize they were going to cost so much, that we lost Beastly Kingdom, for goodness sake. We lost we lost the roller coaster that was going to be the excavation site one. We lost that. Instead, we got Countdown to Extinction, which then later Eisner tried to tie to Dinosaur, which was a horrible movie and failed at the box office. And then everybody was like, and so people now know Dinosaur Ride more than they know the movie, that it actually was named after a movie. And they named it that, like, they knew that they were going to rename it. So anyway, we got Countdown to Extinction, which later became Dinosaur, which is a copy, it's just borrowed technology from Indiana Jones. So it was just like a cheap method of like making a ride. So they used a cheap method. So then we got Camp Mini Mickey instead of Beastly Kingdom. We got like, let's just, put some characters in a spot and maybe a few shows that we don't think will run very long. Granted, we ended up getting Lion King out of that, but Lion King again came from Katzenberg's era. So, yeah. So Animal Kingdom really wasn't a huge, and people still think of it as a half-day park. They still do. Like, yes, you can spend all day there if you really love the animals, but it is still considered a half-day park now. And they also marketed it as not a zoo. Not a zoo is how they've marketed it, which was actually a horrible idea because it made all of the zoos in the country feel like, are we not good enough? So it actually caused a whole bunch of ill will with all the zoos in the country, which had to be undone later. And then they built partnerships with the zoos because they realized that was a wiser idea for conservation, to have people have a partnership with their local zoo. And so it makes way more sense to do that than to just say, like, we're not a zoo, we're better. So that was Eisner's decision to do this, not a zoo. So Animal Kingdom, MGM Studios also, it was planned to be a place where they would film movies. It was supposed to be a studio lot, an active studio lot. And they did film a few things there, but then that whole idea just kind of crumbled because most of their operations were back in LA. So it was a horrible idea because, like, they don't want to truck everything across the country to film things, and when they could just do it in Hollywood for cheaper in Burbank. So it was like, we're going to do exactly what Universal Studios is doing, and we'll have a real live thing, and we'll bring in celebrities. They did for a while. They brought in celebrities every week, and they would, like, have panels with them, and they'd make their handprints. That's why we have all those celebrity handprints. But that went away too. Like, it didn't, so none of the like ideas that it was built on actually ended up even like staying. So, and okay, you said you credited things to Tokyo. Eisner really didn't have a lot to do with Tokyo. It was operated by somebody completely different. So I don't even think you can count that because it opened.
I said Disney Sea.
Well, you said Tokyo. I wrote it down.
Tokyo Disney Sea.
You said the first. No, you said the trackless ride. And that happened in Tokyo, and that was not under him. And Disney Sea. Don't get me started on Disney Sea, because Disney Sea was going to be at Long Beach in California. Okay, and this is where Michael Eisner, we haven't even talked about Michael Eisner's shady business practices yet, okay? So for Westcott, one of the reasons that Westcott didn't get built was because they announced this project was going to happen to the community, and it included property that didn't belong to Disney or Anaheim. It included private property in their proposal. So imagine if you're like reading your morning coffee, okay? Like, I'm reading my morning, oh, where's my mug? You're reading your paper and you're drinking your coffee, and you see that your house is going to be torn down to be part of this Westcott project by Disney. That actually happened to people under Eisner's leadership. They realized that Disney was going to try to take their property away from them, which is awful. So unethical. But that's, he didn't care. He figured they'd just buy him out. It'll be fine. No big deal. So that happened there. But then if we're talking about Disney Sea, let me make sure I'm pulling up all my notes so we get all of the right things here. So that was originally going to be a proposal that was either going to be in, where is it? It was going to be in Long Beach. But then there was so much red tape. Here it is. Okay, it was canceled in 1991 because residents hated the project. Eisner, in his shady business practices, also pitted Long Beach against Anaheim to try to make them compete for their business to build this new park. It was going to be called Port Disney, and also Disney Sea. And then what ended up happening was that Disney realized they didn't have any control over the area because they had to go, in order to do it, they would have had to put landfill into the water to build more land to build this park to have enough space. And then they realized he's getting into environmentalists getting really upset about it, and federal government, local, state regulations that they never had to deal with in Anaheim, just really just blocking the project. And so they ended up not doing that at all. Of course, then we later see the idea resurface in Tokyo, so that it did transfer over there eventually, and that's how we ended up with Disney Sea. But it was going to be another gate that never happened. So there's two gates that he even planned that never happened, which is probably for the best for their company image. What else did you say? Okay, you talked about Splash Mountain. This is one of my favorite Eisner stories. Eisner wanted Splash Mountain to be themed after Splash, the movie, the romantic comedy about a mermaid. So he wanted it to have a mermaid in the attraction and to call it Splash. And the Imagineers were horrified, and they're like, this is a terrible idea. But Eisner wanted to tie everything back to the movie. So instead, I believe it was Tony Baxter who suggested Song of the South, and that's how we ended up getting Song of the South instead. And he's like, no, well, let's do Splash because at least the name can get tied into it. And all the Imagineers were like embarrassed, and they're just like embarrassed for him because they're like, this is a horrible idea. And they eventually convinced him to name it Splash Mountain instead so they could tie it into the mountain range, but that was not Eisner's idea. So Splash Mountain, I think, is largely Tony Baxter and the rest of the Imagineering team. They really kept it from being something that would have been forgotten pretty easily. So, okay, your turn. Go for it.
Splash Mountain would have never gotten built if Michael Eisner didn't have his kid Brett, who stared at the model, pointed at it, and said, "What's that?" He completely was going to ignore it in a boardroom and walk away. So I'm just going to say that it was his kid that even made that thing happen because he pointed it out. And Michael Eisner didn't even notice it. However, you're right. Splash tried to tie into movies. They did that quite a bit. But that's not something uncommon in Disney practice to try to tie in movies with attractions to try to sell both. That has happened quite a bit. All right. I'm trying to think if I have anything else on attractions. Oh, Dinosaur. You called Dinosaur cheap. You also said that they reused their Indiana Jones ride vehicles and systems. That has happened across all of the parks multiple times. So that's not unique. And in fact, I think that's an endearing quality to come up with some sort of innovative piece and then reuse it. So I just feel like that is not the case. And to say that that ride is cheap, Countdown to Extinction was amazing. And the retheme of Dinosaur, different, but we wouldn't have had Dr. Seeker without it. So I'm okay with it. And the dinosaur, honestly, we only see the dinosaur twice. Well, 3 times. See him outside in a statue. We see it in the pre-show. And, also holding up the log and then the exit video. So 4 times. So it's like not really even though it's like the premise of the ride, it's not really the ride. The ride is like, let's just be scared with dinosaurs, which was a more grown up thing, which was clearly trying to make Disney more adult. And I'm not going to lie, that part of Eisner, I love. I love that the parks got a little bit more adults because they needed to be more competitive. Because if everything was just childish, all right, ready? This is going to sound like a bold statement, and everyone might be like, oh, you're an awful person. Before Mel and I had kids, we didn't like going to Magic Kingdom that much. We went to Magic Kingdom, but not that much. We went to other places. And granted, we were in our 20s, so like going to Epcot and all that stuff was like really enjoyable, like as you're young and dumb and all that stuff, right? And I still, my favorite attractions were in Magic Kingdom, but it was too kiddie at times. So, we would go for like more of the thrill rides and those kind of things. So to me, the adultification of the parks is a good thing. So like Alien Encounter, even though it's no longer around, that was a positive for me, even though it was scary for a lot of people. As a kid, I was horrified and amazed, and I liked having that kind of thrill. I really, honestly, I don't want to get too much into, like, you mentioned one part where they talk about specifics of like lands usage and proposing for Westcott that they're going to take over other people's area. Well, you know what? That was your boy Tony Baxter's favorite project, was one that was going to take over private property. So I don't know how you feel about that, but it's Listen, these things now, the eye roll is so. All right, ready? Time out, time out. This is like non-debate, Kirk. I love you, and this is really fun, and I just want to say that. So, all right, I'm going back to debate, Kirk. So, this is like no ill will. This is awesome. I have so much that's not inside the parks. Do you have anything else that's parks related?
Yeah,
I'm sure you have a lot.
I do. So, yes, I have. Let me make sure I'm mentioning what you're saying. So, Test Track is interesting. I think I would agree. I'll give you a little something. I think Test Track like it's still a pretty popular ride now, so I would say it's not a complete failure. I will say
It's the
that.
number one e-ticket.
I said it's not a complete failure. But, however, it was supposed to be this. The original attraction was going to be this history of automobiles. It was going to be edutainment of going through things, and GM said, "We're not doing that. You can't do that if we're going to like do this." So you instead they changed it to the crash test dummy was the original concept. It's like different now, but that was like the whole concept is that you'd be a crash test dummy instead, which I guess is still educational to an extent, but like if we're talking about the idea behind Epcot, was that compromise was that good for that ride? Yeah, that's a question to ask. So Test Track, Kali River Rapids, by the way, in Animal Kingdom, also kind of like a huge fail because it was supposed to be twice as long as it is, and it isn't because they were going to make it go by live animals, and then that didn't work out because they're like, oh, we're going to keep the animals up. I don't know why they couldn't have figured out a way to just move the animals or move the track to make it like twice as long because it's way too short. If you've ever been on Grizzly River Run and then went to Kali River Rapids, which was made by the same Swiss company, you'd be like, what the heck is going on here? Why is this so short? So I consider that one a huge fail. A lot of people don't like it. I know that this out there that are like, what is this ride? And it was going to be Tiger Rapids Run, and then it changed. So that opened in 1999, so still in this time period. So that was a fail in the parks as well. And then Hong Kong. We didn't even talk about Hong Kong. If we're talking about gates, Hong Kong was awful. Eisner negotiated that contract and they announced it in 1998 and then it opened in 2005, which is when he left. So it was one of the cheapest parks ever created. It lacked Disney standards and they had to put billions in it to correct it. And then Disney officials had to navigate political and social issues, also physical ones, and the company was broke most of that time. So it was really like Hong Kong was not a great choice, but that he just had this vision of like gates at all costs almost. Like I'm like, is that the best option? I don't know. I don't know if it's the ends justify the means seems to be his way of going about things. And I feel like there was one. You talked about Tony Baxter and Westcott. Well, but Tony Baxter wasn't involved in negotiating deals. I feel like if he was involved in like, are we going to take these people's property away without like, negotiating with them in a fair way, I want to make sure that Tony Baxter's like not thrown under the bus here because I don't know if he had anything to do with that deal. That seems like Eisner. So, and then there's two more things for the parks that I have. One of them is the Swan and Dolphin. Jackie, I don't know if you're around, but here we are. So, the Swan and Dolphin was designed by Michael Graves, who is a postmodern architect. And he was brought on specifically by Eisner because he liked his storytelling through architecture. Okay. But Michael Graves wasn't a Disney fan at all. He didn't have a favorite character or a movie, and he thought it was creepy that 4-foot mouse walked around in the parks. He was not a Disney person. So he did not want it to have a Disney story attached to it. He wanted it to have an original story. And then, so the concept of the dolphin, we went over this on Mom Street the other day, so I won't get too far into it, but it is this bizarre underwater volcano earthquake story. It lifted dolphins out of the water, and then the banana leaves on the side of the building are tropical plants growing on the island, and the black box was the heart of the island, which burst open from the sheer force of the events, and then water spilled down the outside of the building, and then there's a dolphin fillet pool, and it's his own kind of story, and I guess they thought that that would turn into some sort of like connect. It would become a new Disney story in that way, but most people don't get that story. It's not obvious. It's something. So, and everybody's like, this doesn't look like a dolphin because it's Italian. So yeah, but anyway. And Michael Graves also called the beach club and yacht clubs the servants' quarters when they were making the Swan and Dolphin. He's like, look over there at the servants' quarters. So, great guy, hired by Michael Eisner. Um, and gosh, what else was, I had something very specific that was to the parks, and I don't want to lose it. With the Swan and Dolphin, we had America, Euro Disney. Yeah, I might have to find it because I know what it is. I know what it is. Okay, so if we're going to talk about the parks. So under Eisner's watch, there was severe deep budget cuts because of what happened in Euro Disney. They had to make cuts everywhere, which actually compromised guest safety and cast member safety to the point where someone actually passed away. So Eisner brought on Paul Pressler, who became the president of the Walt Disney Attractions in 1998. He had a merchandising background. He's very similar to Chapek in a lot of ways. He was known for cost-cutting measures, such as reducing customer service training, having workers wash their own uniforms, and closing rides and shows early. So he was like not about guest experience or cast member experience. So this is what I'm saying. Remember, all these things that we don't like about Disney started with Eisner. This Paul Pressler thing is what happened here with Paul Pressler is what started, these CMs really just not being treated very well. Someone even said Paul Pressler looks at the parks as a retail operation where you're selling a product, but it's not that kind of a business. It's a business about ideas. The theme parks are about innovation. They're not about every inch of this place yielding a profit, but that's how he treated it. And so because of his cost cutting and the way that he even tried to discontinue the disabled discount, and then there was a huge backlash, and people were like, what? You're going to do that? That's awful. So he wanted to do that, and then because of all of his cost cutting, a whole bunch of upper level Imagineers left the company at this time, including Eddie Soto, who we talked about with that secret tunnel that was going to go underneath the Rivers of America, Robert L. Shin, Ken Wong, Mitch Hill, a whole bunch of Imagineers left at this point. And then, so those running the parks were pressured to make previously unimaginable reductions in daily maintenance and upkeep. Even safety measures that used to be routine were scaled to the bare minimum. Cleanliness went downhill. So if you're upset about the parks not being as clean, that's when this started, was in this era. And then there was an accident on the Columbia because a cast member had not been trained properly on how to dock the Columbia. And he put a rope around a deck cleat, but the ship hadn't been fully brought into port. And so the deck cleat had been on rotten wood, and it ripped up from the deck, and it hit somebody, a father in the head, and his wife across her face, and he passed away, and she was disfigured, and they had their two small children with them, and it happened on Christmas Eve. Like, horrible. That was not a great move for the parks. He might have opened gates, but at what cost? Go ahead.
Yeah, I hate to be Debbie Downer, but yeah, I mean, every single amusement park has horrible accidents. And I agree that, some things can be said to training, something can be said to the people. We have no idea who the type of person, who they were, and what happens, right? Like, for example, I don't want to do this. You're making me do this.
I know that there's accidents everywhere. We don't have to talk about all the accidents. I will concede that there's accidents everywhere, but my point
Okay.
is that this really there was an overall decline in safety and training, and that's largely why this likely happened. Is it a direct
Maybe that's all. That's
correlation?
all conjecture.
Yeah.
That's all conjecture. I don't agree with that because that's not written in stone that we know who this person was, what their training was. I don't know any of that. They put somebody in place who actually said that everything shouldn't be money making, and so like everything was like refuted based. But then you feel like in practice everything has been shortcutted. So you know, anyway. Yeah, and people have sadly died in so like Deborah Gale, we talked about her before with America Sings and she getting trapped, and that was like the day of her
Sad.
engagement. She was
Ugh,
asked her parents
sad.
if she could get engaged and then got crushed. Is that due to poor training? Is that an accident? I don't know. And like none of those things I really want to legitimately talk about because they're just not enjoyable in the parks. But that you brought it up. So
Well, it was
educational,
relevant.
right?
It was
Yeah,
relevant.
it's
It was
okay.
relevant.
It's okay. We're talking about whatever. So I'm not going to harp on this. Educational test track still does Belgian blocks, still has a lot of the cars in the background. And fun fact is Michael Eisner was actually thinking about making Disney cars for a hot second. So like there was like this idea of potentially working and partnering with GM and making Disney cars. And they were talking about trying to make them the safest cars ever built. So I don't know what they would have looked like. It never actually went very far, but like talking about like interesting ideas, like he tried it, right?
I'm like
Tried
with
it.
his giant face on the hood.
That's your opinion. I bet they would have looked really nice. Also, like you brought up again that like positioning and trying to get people to vie for positions. And when Disney was alive and looking for his second park, he got St. Louis, he got Florida, he got even my lowly state of New Jersey involved in trying to necessarily bid for what would be a viable option. A lot of that is tax breaks. There's so many things that go into it. But to say like I get the private, I totally get that. But those kinds of things happen quite a bit to try to posture and get land in area. And in fact, we just dealt with another one with Reedy Creek. So like that's still a real life thing that exists. All right, what else do I have about the parks before I move on? I talked about Riverfront Square, which is St. Louis. Okay. I feel good about the parks. You keep saying that everything was like a disaster and just was like overcost and everything was awful, like in terms of monetary. And the truth is, the company was going to die. And it was going to get pieced off and die. That's what was going to happen if somebody didn't come in there and dramatically change the balance sheet. And I know that's uncomfortable, and I know people don't want to talk about that. But the truth is, a business, its lifeblood is cash. And I know that seems soulless. I get that. But you can have a soul and still make money. You can totally have a soul and still make money. And the company went from literally a $2 billion valuation to a $67 billion valuation. And it was going to get a hostile takeover. So that didn't occur under Eisner's era. So, and even though the parks and the gates were not necessarily like right up front, like out the gates making tons and tons of money, I don't think I've ever seen any of these parks super, super successful day one, except for maybe the Magic Kingdom, right? But that was because something came prior to it, right? All right. I need to get out of the parks because I'm going to throw up if I stay in the parks. You know? So, okay. The only thing I'll say is two things get introduced into the parks that would not have happened if it wasn't for the relationship with Steven Spielberg and Paramount Pictures, particularly with Eisner's introduction of Indiana Jones, because he worked on Raiders of the Lost Ark. So bringing in the Indiana Jones stunt show, and then also with the very first time ever with Lucas, George Lucas bringing Star Tours into the parks. And that is not a small thing because that leads us to the acquisition of Lucasfilm. And that is 100% a film relationship with Spielberg and with George Lucas. Now, there's a lot of things that happen after the fact, but that gets started because it's like interesting. Like, why are there licensed IP within a Disney park? And this is like everybody who loves Marvel, everybody who loves Star Wars, everybody loves the Disney Star Wars. And I know there's a lot of like anti-Disney Star Wars, but like Disney Star Wars is awesome, and we wouldn't have any of that universe without the start here. But let's talk about actual films. There's so many films that I think, and even TV shows that people know and love and adore that happened during this time period. So if you want to discount everything from animation, which you cannot, all of that animation happened during that time period. At Miramax, we get a resurgence of all of the Halloween films. You get Scream, Kill Bill, Sin City. Touchstone's TV has Golden Girls, crushed. Golden Girls is such a good show. We get the Pirates of the Caribbean series, the live action. So the very first time where a attraction inspires a film. That was the first time ever in the Walt Disney World Company. So I thought that was kind of cool. And then just because like I'm a geek for some of this stuff, like Armageddon, The Water Boy, and I loved Gone in 60 Seconds. Not a commercial success. I just like the film. So there's all these films that
With
what
Eisner's
does that
face on the
mean?
front of the car.
Dude, Gone in 60 Seconds. Let's boost some cars, man. I'm in. I'm in. It
There
was
was a
so good.
whole
And then
slew of films so, like that had that at that time. Like Italian Job, I feel like was around that era too. Like I feel like there was a
there
bunch of
was
them.
yeah, that was an era of like Fast and the Furious was out in that time
Yeah,
period too.
it's like
Like
driving fast was the
yeah,
theme of the era.
driving. I think there was like a movie that was called like just the driver or something or like the transporter. That's what he was called. He was called the transporter.
Well, it's Speed too. That might have been earlier than that, but Speed was around there. Yeah. Anyway,
So, and then of course all the networks: ABC, Fox Family, ESPN, which gives us ESPN bar. The Muppets. The Muppets is huge. We get all of the Muppets except for the Sesame Street characters, which are still in Busch Gardens, which is kind of fun, licensing wise. I already mentioned Lion King musical, Disney princesses, got that. Hocus Pocus and Nightmare Before Christmas. Just saying. Still huge, huge. We couldn't have Halloween without some of those characters.
Nightmare Before Christmas was 1993, so that was
Yeah.
yeah, that was well before
Would
1994.
you?
So.
It still happened under his error, lady. Get over it, okay?
But it's
You
significant.
can't
Okay,
just
okay.
watch. He
Are
still
you
had
done?
to say yes to make the film. He still had to say yes to make the. How about that? He's the only one that can say yes to a project. If you want to think that he's some egomaniac, so guess what? He said yes to all the films that you love, that your buddy Jeffrey made.
Oh, okay. We want to go there. So, Finding Nemo, Eisner told. Are you done? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Are you
No,
done?
no,
You
no. You
ready?
didn't
Okay.
interrupt me, and I didn't mention Finding Nemo just for everybody on here. I didn't get to that point yet in time. So just saying.
Let's talk about it though, because Eisner told Pixar that Finding Nemo was a terrible movie when he was in the pre-screening process. He injected his own ideas and rewrote the script. And then he announced Pixar was ending its partnership with Disney and let everyone know, and on no uncertain terms, it was because of Eisner. Sorry, that was, I should say that was after that, with Steve Jobs announced that. But he injected his own ideas into rewriting the script, and then they ignored all of his ideas and then made the movie as they had planned, which then also kind of raised this animosity between Eisner and Pixar. And that's when Steve Jobs was just like, we're not doing this anymore. Or like, we're going to go make films as we want to without your crazy, crazy ideas. So that was part of that. If you're talking about movies, yeah, I will say that making not what Disney was known for, making more of the towards teenage adult kind of centered movies. He I guess, did do some of those, but let's talk about some of the animation that happened after Frank Wells. We had The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which, some people like, but it really failed. It didn't do well. Hercules also didn't do well at the box office. It was the first Walt Disney Animation Studios project to fall shy of $100 million at American box office since The Rescuers Down Under in 1990. So without Frank Wells, we're just starting to flounder. And then it gets worse and worse. They had a little bit of success with Mulan, but then they had Bug's Life, I don't think did as well. They had Doug's first movie, Tarzan, Toy Story 2, but that was Pixar. Fantasia 2000, the Tigger movie, Dinosaur, Emperor's New Groove, which admittedly, I think is an underrated movie. I like Emperor's New Groove. Recess, School's Out, Atlantis, The Lost Empire. They did end up having Monsters, Inc., but that was Pixar. Return to Neverland, Lilo and Stitch. I'll give them Lilo and Stitch. I like Lilo and Stitch. Spirit Away, Treasure Planet, Jungle Book 2, Piglet's Big Movie. It starts getting worse and worse and worse as we're starting. Like, some of these are
Yep.
just like,
I'm
just
going to
go
interrupt you.
downhill.
I agree. Piglet and the Tigger movie were terrible.
You don't like
There's
Winnie
just-
the Pooh. So. It's a Brother Bear, which was really like, nobody even remembers that Brother Bear exists most of the time. They had Teacher's Pet, Home on the Range, Incredibles, which was Pixar, Pooh's Heffalump movie, Howl's Moving Castle. House Moving Castle, and they have Valiant, and then Chicken Little, which he like changed the story to Chicken Little to include aliens, and everybody was like, that was an Eisner idea. That came from Eisner. So all of these movies, that's what happened until he left in the animation, and to the point where he was like thinking about closing Disney Animation because he had failure after failure after failure. But that's because a lot of the ideas were his. So we get all this like string of very like not great movies, with a few like good movies were the exception and not the rule during the time when he had complete creative control over what movies were being produced there. So yeah. And then if we're talking about acquisitions, he passed on the Family Channel, which would have been a huge thing. He had the opportunity to do that, and then shows like Survivor and Sopranos, those were also pitched to him, and he turned them down. So, you know, like there were some things that he got and some things he didn't. So that happened. And then I feel like we have to talk, since we're kind of just talking, I know we're talking movies, but can we please talk about the Go Network? Because remember how I said everything you don't like about Disney probably started with Eisner? Well, guess what website always fails you when you're trying to get your dining reservations or trying to book something that everybody else is, and the network also always crashes? Well, the Go Network was what Eisner wanted to do to compete with AOL, because he wanted to compete with everybody. It was, I think, a jealousy, ego thing that he wanted to have what everybody else had. So they invested $1.7 billion to acquire InfoSeek, a search engine that would be used as the foundation for Go. But by the time they did this, they were not only hopelessly behind the competition, but the very nature of the internet was shifting away from this type of service. So you could have an email through the Go Network. You can have all of this stuff. And today, like when you go to Disney website, you'll see that it's like Go is part of their URL address. So they still have it. But this was like a huge project that Eisner was like, we're going to get into the internet. And it was a huge financial disaster. So, and to this day, the network's terrible. Like the website's awful. And like yeah. So, I'll let you go. I've been talking for a while, but.
Okay.
Yeah.
Animation, let's talk about it. Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hercules, Mulan, Tarzan were all like very average box office. But I would argue that some of the best music came from those four films. Absolutely fantastic music. And they are huge cult fan favorites in animation. And I think it took later eras to really respect and understand them. There's definitely a bunch of flops. But I also just look at animation, right? And the last couple of years has been really good. But there was such a doldrum before Eisner where it was really bad. I mean, although I do like the Black Cauldron, but I mean, it was...
Elliot likes that one too.
Dude, the Black Cauldron is really good. But anyway. So, okay. Moving on from films, we do get an Eisner that pulls us into other things that become huge fan favorites that are not traditional Disney mediums. Video games. We get involved in video games. We know that we want to get into... it's basically trying to position yourself in households in ways that people's attention are being drawn to. And a big part of that was the development with Square of one of, hands down, the best RPG games ever made, which was Kingdom Hearts. People still freak out over that game, hands down. And that happened during his era. Going back into your house was huge. And I'll get a chance to talk about InfoSeek and Go.com for a second. But this is where we get, and I know everybody who grew up in the 90s remembers the Disney Vault. So there was a period where they would bring movies out into cinema every like 3 years or so, or maybe sometimes even 7 years, depending on it, right? But the Disney VHS Vault gets introduced under Eisner, where instead of bringing a film back every 7 years or so, or 3 years, depending on which film it was, and over the course of, they did the math on it, like over the course of 28 years, it'll gross like $128 million, right? Over that long of a period. Or we can start releasing and staging the VHS tapes at home so people can utilize new technology, because VHS tape was new technology, and bring out these films like every 2, 3, 4 years. And then you bring them out and then they go away. And that created this crazy need for people to want to collect. And these are actually still collectibles to today, which is like so wild to me, that the Black Diamonds VHS like clamshell cases. And like, I love that they're making like purses out of them. And they also made, I saw them at Disney Character Warehouse. They made like these little clamshell ones that look like the VHS holder. Sorry, I just have like really good nostalgia of like the plastic and the feel of it, like opening it and closing the VHS.
Little squeak that it would
Yeah,
make
it would be like, oh my gosh, I love that. But it was like all these little like wishable kind of characters that were in it. But I just, VHS tapes like that, like a tangible physical Disney film. Before that, that experience was just a ticket, right? So that was a ticket and that was actually in it. So bringing it home made it so much more personal. And I know for me, I wore out a lot of those tapes watching them. So bringing that home, I thought was a huge adventure. I'm gonna do one more because I have a lot more other things. So I'm just gonna touch on Infoseek and Go.com. They weren't competing with AOL. I mean, technically AOL was a thing. They were competing with the #1 search engine in the world, and their goal was actually to be Google before Google, but they didn't know what they were doing. The internet was in the 90s, bro. Do you remember the internet on the 90s where you had to go,
Yes.
and don't pick up the phone, I'm on the internet. You pick it up and be like, you're like, what is that?
Well. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So like we remember those eras of the internet, right? Infoseek was the #2 largest search engine in the world, and the purpose was to purchase that so that they could position themselves, especially with their products, towards the top of some of these searches, and then end up selling advertising spaces on these. The biggest thing that happened, and this was not an Eisner decision, was to rebrand it. The board made the decision to rebrand it to Go.com. Eisner said we should keep it to Infoseek because that's the well-known brand. So that was not an Eisner decision. That was the board of directors' decision. And ever since it went to Go.com, the entire thing flopped pretty miserably. And funny enough, if you actually go and look at Infoseek.com, if you're just curious, like, do these exist? It's really fun. You type in Infoseek.com, and where does it redirect you to? It redirects you to Go.com, which redirects you to Shop Disney. So I think that's like, they still have Infoseek, they still own Infoseek.com, and they still own Go.com, but they do nothing with them. And I mean, in the early days of the internet, yeah, Infoseek was a big one. There was a lot. There was Lycos, there was Hotbot, there was Ask Jeeves, there was a bunch of search engines. And like to say that like search engines weren't a popular thing, well, Google wasn't even out yet. Alphabet didn't even exist. So they just did they know what they were doing or put the right people in place? No. But were they attempting? If you look at the way that Disney was acquiring media companies, the path made a lot of sense to get involved in another advertising platform, which was essentially a search engine, because all of these other networks are basically to sell commercials. It's entertainment to sell commercials. So it flopped, but took a stab at it during a time period when nobody knew anything about the internet. I'm done.
Oh,
for
okay.
now.
Well, I'm watching the time, so I'm like, okay, we should probably start moving towards wrapping this up. I would say, just mentioning about the movie releases and things, yes, they all came out of the vault, all of those things. I mean, all of it was just trying to desperately cover up for the fact that everything else was failing. Like they all of their movies in theaters were failing. All of their parks that they were creating, their new parks, were not doing well. The Euro Disney thing was a huge disaster. So this was all just kind of like, what else can we do to make money? So they raised ticket prices, and they're like, let's release all the all the old movies again, like, which you kind of see happening again right now. You see them like.
That's what I'm writing. What do you think happened right now, bro? What do you think happened
under poor leadership? You have to do some desperate things. So
it happened under Iger too, bro. What are you talking about?
I'm just gonna say that I think that those were just all necessities for them to recover financially from everything that that Eisner did wrong, and it really was Eisner. And so, like, looking at this like bigger picture here, I don't know if you have a lot of other things, but I'll just say, so let's just talk about the end of his career, maybe a little bit. So what? No,
I have more.
you have more.
I have more
Okay,
good things. I have more blessings to the
are they all
company.
things that happened after 1994?
They are. They are amazing.
Yeah, shocking.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to talk about it?
Go for it.
Okay. You know what I love is being able to experience Disney when I'm at home. Because honestly, that's the thing is when when you're at the parks, you're at the parks. But you know what better way to experience Disney than to go to your local mall and does it cut us off after 2 hours? I think it cuts us off after 2 hours. I think we've been going on for so long. All right, hang on. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to end this and then we're going to come back because I don't think it allows us to do a multi-host. So, all right, I'm yeeting everybody and I'll be right back. Wait, hang on.
That was
I wonder if it only allows us to do 2 hours of co-host and then dumps us because timing wise, like it's relatively close.
I don't know. That was weird. I just figured it hated your point that you were making.
No, it's a really good point.
Okay.
I think that was TikTok mic dropping for me. No, it's just anyway. The Disney Store. If you remember growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, and then you probably didn't have one close to you until the late 90s. In the late 90s, there are 749 of these stores across the globe. The Disney Store was incredible. And before they started licensing these out, and they really kind of get diminished when they sell them to, I think it's like called like Children's Place or something, they are an experience. Like going into the Disney Store was as close as going to the parks itself, in my personal opinion. There was a lot of magic in those stores. Coincidentally, they also did try to get into the fast food industry, and this is tied to the Disney Store. They opened up two of these. They were called Mickey's Kitchen, and they had hamburgers and salads, and they even had like a meatless burger option as well. They didn't last long. They only did two of these pilots, but I did think that was funny that they attempted. So sometimes, you shot and you miss. Mickey's Kitchen was a shot in the mist, although they did have the Chuck E. Cheese one. What was the name of the Chuck E. Cheese Mickey's Chuck E. Cheese? What did they call that? What's the name of it? None of these. They're all trying to like fight them together. There was like a club where you could go, and it was very similar to Chuck E. Cheese, but it was a total rip. But it was Mickey related. It was really cool. Anyway, that existed too for during Eisner. We get. I'm gonna blast through some of these because we just need to keep rolling. We get an NHL team in Anaheim. You get a stadium that basically wasn't being used. So yeah, they tried to utilize movie franchise and sell things. The Mighty Ducks absolutely crushes 1992. They get a NHL franchise. They buy it for 50 million. 25 million have to go to the LA Kings just so that they can play there, so that they share like the LA market. And they keep this all the way through Eisner, all the way until 2005. They end up selling it off. We also get Pleasure Island. I know this is a lot. But I'm just dumping because so that we can for time. So feel free to cut whatever you want in terms, whatever. I'm not doing a deep dive. We get Pleasure Island, which is now 4th of July every single night. You get more adult theming at downtown. I always thought when I was a kid, I was like, Pleasure Island, like, am I going to turn into a donkey if I go there? Everybody's probably like boozing it up real crazy, The Adventurers Club. May she rest in peace. The one place I wish I would have stepped in. I wasn't old enough to go. Puppetronics, please. Amazing. Anyway, Disney Quest. I am actually on a quest to bring back Disney Quest because the NBA experience, thank you, Bob Iger. That worked. Good swing and a miss, Bobby. Disney Quest was amazing. As a kid, I loved Disney Quest. It was so much fun. And a giant arcade. Disney, you're listening. You probably own part of TikTok as a media group. Pizza Planet. Put it where NBA experience is. Make Pizza Planet a reality. You make Pizza Planet a reality with a huge arcade and pizza, and you don't need a park ticket to get into it, but you get a park experience. Let's go. It doesn't need to be Disney Quest. Make it Pizza Planet. And then the last one. Do you like going on water, Kate? You know, maybe going on a giant ship, a cruise line, perhaps. Because I know a lot of people love going on Disney cruises. And it's crazy too because it happened in 1998. You would have thought it would have happened under Frankie Wells, wouldn't you? But no, it just turns out that Carnival and Royal Caribbean, the negotiations with them weren't to the level of Disney's expectations, so they decided to bring it in house. They spent $25 million purchasing and refurbing an island, which became Castaway Cay, and we get the first two of the Disney Cruise Line ships. And I'll stop.
Yeah, I will say that we did get Disney Cruise Line in 1998 was when the Magic started first sailing, and it was the longest cruise ship in the world. So they took two pieces and welded it together to get that title. At the time, it was the longest. So yeah, we got that. DVC also started this time, so Disney jumped in the timeshare industry to try to make more money.
People love DVC.
Yeah, well, yep.
Making money's not evil, Kate, if people love it.
So the retail store thing is interesting because I found this really old article before they did it. I should have made mine. I need one that says 1994. He intends, so this is from before Eisner opened any of the stores. It says he intends to combine a retail store selling Disney doodads with a restaurant serving healthy, low cholesterol food, which was like in trend at the time. The cuisine, he gushes, will be fun, exciting, entertaining, and wonderful, and being healthy and low cholesterol. And he admits that the concept didn't tie in with Disney's other businesses, and most of his associates didn't see much virtue in the plan. In a resigned voice, he adds, "I've been driving everybody crazy." No. So he admitted that the idea of having pairing a restaurant with a store, like nobody liked that idea, but he wanted it, so he was just going to make it anyway. Which I think kind of ties back into the whole idea here was bringing it back to his character as a leader, as a human being, in how he made his Disney things. He was told the way that people described him was arrogant, self-obsessed, morally questionable businessman by the way that he did things. He was a micromanager. There's a quote that Bob Iger said in, I think, in his book, where Eisner says micromanaging is underrated. So he believed in micromanaging in a different way than Walt. Walt was a micromanager in a lot of ways where he's just like, he encourages people and pushed them to do even more than they thought he could do. And stop. But Michael Eisner was really like my way or the highway every time. So I think Walt was willing to hear people out if they had an idea. But Eisner didn't seem to have that same flexibility. So he was a very different kind of micromanager, if that makes sense. He also loved taking credit for other people's work. That was like a hallmark of his time. He took credit for what other people did all the time. And he wanted all the power, but no accountability. So when something failed, he blamed it on other people in his company. That was just what he did. He just threw him under the bus. And he also, as he got more successful, he grew more paranoid and took more risks and pinned failures on others. That's an interesting one. I don't know about that. So I love this quote. It says, this is from The Disney War by James Stewart. Beginning with the lavish, even reckless spending on Euro Disney and continuing with the poorly planned and executed foray into the internet, and perhaps worst of all, the acquisition of the Fox Family Cable Network, each of which is more than $1 billion mistake, Eisner squandered Disney's assets. This is even before considering the exit of Jeffrey Katzenberg, the failure of honor of his contract, and the hiring and firing of Michael Ovitz, personnel and personnel and judgment errors, which in the cost to Disney and the vitriol and publicity they generated are without parallel in American business. They controlled and manipulated the board by keeping members isolated, preferring to communicate one-on-one, selectively doling out information, access, and benefits, and ruthlessly dispatching anyone who dared challenge him. So he was, as a human being, there's what you have for Michael Eisner. And Andrea Van de Kamp, who is a civic leader, she said Michael wants to be the Walt Disney Company, he himself, but he can't do that because she was forced off the board by him. And then Roy O. Disney, who recruited this must be E. Disney. That's an error, I think, who recruited Mr. Eisner to the company in 1984, said, certainly in the last couple of years, it has become very personal. It seems to be a pattern. My ego versus yours has become the issue, not what's best for the company. Which then leads us to how all this went down. How did he leave the company? Well, it was not well, because the same person who hired him lobbied to have him removed because he had turned the company into a rapacious, soulless company, is his exact words. And so there was Roy E. Disney resigned from the board, feeling there was too much micromanagement within the studio because of flops with the ABC TV network, the company's growing timidity in the theme park business, and turning into a soulless company. Eisner's refusal to establish a clear succession plan. He didn't want anybody else to come in. He wanted it to be only himself. And the studio releasing a string of box office movie failures starting in the year 2000, such as Emperor's New Groove and Treasure Planet, which were box office failures despite our personal feelings about Emperor's New Groove. And the company's well-publicized distribution disputes with longtime production partner Pixar Animation Studios and CEO Steve Jobs. So it's like, we're going to lose Pixar. This is bad. So there was on March 3rd of 2004, there was unprecedented 43% of Disney shareholders withheld their proxies to re-elect Eisner to the board. Obviously, 43% is not enough to out him from it. But it was pretty close. It was almost half of the shareholders were like, we need this guy out of here because he's absolutely ruining this company. And so this is Save Disney campaign that Roy E. Disney started. He's Save Disney from Eisner was basically what this campaign was about. And then Disney's board gave this vote followed a stunning rebuke of Eisner and his executive chairman practices by both the Institutional Shareholder Services and Glass Lewis as Shareholder Advisory Services. So basically everybody's like, Eisner's got to leave. So I think they let Eisner resign in 2005. He chose to resign on March 13th and stepped down as CEO 1 year before his contract expired. And I think he knew, he saw the writing on the wall. He was going to get kicked out if he didn't resign. So he left in shambles. The company was not doing well. Things were not, he's like, you can say all you want that he like came in and saved the day. That was him with Frank Wells and Jeffrey Katzenberg. And so everything started to go downhill after that. After 1994, everything. So that's how it ended. You can go.
Okay, cool. The whole secession plan makes me really weird. Like, everyone was obsessed about, like, well, what's the next move? Like, who's taking over? And I hate to tell you this, I have never seen any executive have a great secession plan ever in my life. And that's for companies that I've worked for. That's for companies that I've observed. Almost none of them. The best way is for somebody who's amazing to die. I hate to say that. That's the best way for a succession plan. Somebody who's really talented within the company, that's the best thing. But like having somebody to backfill. Also, backfilling wise, this is where Bob Iger starts getting backfilled by Eisner. Eisner already puts him in a place of power in the early 2000s. So he's moving up within the company ranks as well, and eventually does get appointed. Nobody's really excited about Bob Iger. It's not like Bob Iger is like this great bastion that everyone now views him. Remember, everything is like hindsight is 2020, but at the time seems like wasn't necessarily the fit. But this is you got to remember where Roy E. and everybody else who's the proxy vote, That is a shareholder. That is a dollar and cents decision. And they felt that, you know what, honestly, it has run its course. And maybe it did run its course. And maybe Eisner should have left a couple of years prior, or maybe 5 years prior. There could have been other things. But they let him run for a long time because of all of the successes, because of the crazy amount of successes and influence and acquisitions. Like, you cannot underplay that Disney is now the largest media company in the world because of Michael Eisner. You can't. Like, it's just it's undisputed. It's also, they are the leaders in theme park entertainment under the Eisner era because of the amount of theme parks that they have. They just have a larger swath and they do it better than everyone. Sure, did they have to spend all this extra money to refurb and change things? Yeah, you have to do that all the time. That's not unique. Micromanaging. Let's get into micromanaging. Walt Disney, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates were all micromanagers. And but you know what leads a successful micromanager? Somebody who doesn't necessarily micromanage the people, but micromanages the product. And now, I don't think Eisner is the smartest person in the world. I don't think he's the best creative in the world. He's had a lot of great ideas and a lot of bad ideas. And to pit like his failures as being the largest part of his reign, I just disagree, because there were so many the there's such a it was called the Disney Renaissance. There is no Disney Renaissance. You know what era we're living in? The Disney post Renaissance. That's like a sad life to live. Now, granted, under Iger we got some really, really great, especially the acquisition of Pixar and Lucasfilms, one of my favorite things that Iger has ever gotten. I love it. But here's an example of obsession about product that is hands down for Michael Eisner. When you're staying at any of the Disney hotels, if you've ever been to any other hotel, you notice things like the shampoo bottles at other hotels are, you gotta squint to read them. Well, when he was staying in the Disney Parks hotels, he was like, why is the font so small? It's a little minute thing. But he wanted everyone to be able to see whether they were putting shampoo or conditioner or poison on their head. So, micromanage detail of a finalized product. No, but honestly, the truth is, I don't care if you attest it to the team or whatever, but just more accomplishments have happened during the Eisner era than, well, forget about it. Like, we're not talking about Walt, but nobody after him has held a position as long as him and has accomplished more and has set the company up for success to where it is now. I mean, you wouldn't have the streaming service if they didn't start getting involved with internet and VHS and all this other additional media. That all paves the path to eventually get to Disney Plus. It's a lot, and there's a lot that happened. I mean, it was over 20, how many years? 1984 to 2005.
Yeah.
You know, so 21 years. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna just, we have to wrap this up soon, but I would say, given that, for the closing arguments here, I would say, like I'd said, almost all the things that we hate about Disney or that we feel like makes it into a soulless corporation really started with Eisner. Came from the top. He raised ticket prices. That's the first time we saw ticket prices go up, was under Eisner. We saw the Go Network, which we all hate using all the time for Disney, that crashes literally every day. The all of the gates he made, yes, he opened a lot of gates, but a lot of them were either not what they were supposed to be, were really poorly planned because of the decisions that he made, or they were designed out of like copycatting, jealousy, ego, or trying to take away competition from other local places. He also, like, every gate he opened just wasn't well done. Like, it all had to be repaired and fixed for billions of dollars afterwards. And even the treatment of cast members and people went so far downhill. He was not people first. He was money first. He was ego first. He was himself first. And I mean, that was the opposite of Walt's vision for the park. He was absolutely for the people and their experience. That was his heart. That was what he wanted. And I would also make the argument, do like, yes, all of this stuff happened. Of course, we have all the movies that also failed, but do the ends justify the means of how he got it done as a person, as a businessman, as a man? What he the processes and the way that he went about things and the way that he treated people, was it worth it for all the things that he did? Like, does it matter how he went about doing it, or does not matter at all? So, I mean, that's always something I take into account when I think of Eisner, is like, how did he do it? How was he as a human being treating other human beings that he was working with, that he interacted with, that he was building things next to? How did he treat them? Because I think that matters personally. So, that's just more my opinion than facts, but that is there. So, and I would bring it right back to the quote, that to make money is our only objective. I know you say take that out of context, but he said that. He said that to make money is his only objective. It's not about the art. It wasn't about making history or people or anything. It's just about making money. And that's how he operated the whole time. And I would say that everything after Frank Wells and Jeffrey Katzenberg, the whole thing just went downhill. So it was, yeah, there was some successes early on. I think there was a smattering of things that went okay from that point on. But most of the projects he spearheaded, because he wanted it his way, they didn't go well. And that's why he had to be removed. So, yeah. That's that.
Fair. If a thing's not growing, it's going to die. Michael Eisner. The company was going to die, Kate. It was going to be...
He was going to die when he was on his way out, because he had crashed it.
Objection during my closing argument? Like, seriously? Where is my... A little couth. In 1984, Saul Steinberg would have purchased the company, and he would have pieced it out. And we would have not had the company... We would not have any of the places that we know and enjoy and love. The straight up truth is, you can hate on the gates not being perfect out the gate, but these are 9 extra parks that we have shared amazing memories with my kids, you've done with your families, that countless people that on here have shared. We have gotten princesses like Ariel and Belle and Jasmine and Pocahontas, and even after 94 Mulan. Amazing princesses that have not only changed the shape of restaurants and hotels and attractions and future films. We barely even scratched the surface on resorts. You have 2 extra resorts added to Anaheim, and we get 18 in Walt Disney World. 18 resorts. I get Port Orleans French Quarter. Delicious beignets.
You can't throw new info in your closing arguments. It's not fair.
You yelled at me during mine, so I think I can do whatever I want in this.
It's not fair.
Your biggest characterization is that he was not a good person. And I will tell you this. I don't have enough information to know whether he was a good person or not to people. I don't know enough about him. I've never sat with him. I've watched interviews. I've listened to speeches. I have listened to and read some pieces of things, but I've never read... I would love to read like more biographies that were about other people that worked with him rather than from him, because that's a completely different biased source. But what I will say is, for the Walt Disney World Company, Michael Eisner saved and created the renaissance of Disney to help pave the path and landscape for where we are, right? That existed. He hired those team members. They wouldn't exist without him. So, my point, was Michael Eisner the greatest person? Probably not. Was he Walt? No. Did he want to be Walt? Maybe. Was his ego really big? Probably. But did he push the company to a new direction and into things like they've never touched before, like the cruises and stores and all the new attractions and theme parks? 100%. And we've gotten amazing Disney classics out of this. So, for what it's worth, the contributions have been better than any other person after Walt. So that's the reason why I think Michael Eisner gets glossed over, because people don't like him as a person, and I'm not discounting that. I don't know enough to say that he's horrible or the worst, but the accomplishments of the company during that time period are pretty. They're astounding. They're absolutely astounding.
Okay. I feel like we're always going to sit on the opposite side of this fence. It's so crazy.
This wasn't like a like
I
I
know we were
think
going to convince each other of anything. We're
well
just
we
this
were
is what it
never,
is.
because I don't think Eisner. Here's the thing, I can think that Eisner might be a terrible person. I could, and still think what happened in the company and what it paved the path for and all the things that were accomplished during it still were good, even though the person, that one person, might not have been the best. But there's all these amazing animators and Imagineers who had careers and built amazing dreams for themselves underneath that leadership. So it's hard for me to just go, this
In
dude
spite
stinks
of
because he's
leadership.
terrible. But that's okay. I don't care if they did it despite. Do you know how many companies I've worked for that I've done things that they've disagreed with, but I knew was right?
But the
You
point is,
know?
was Eisner the person who kind of like was the driving force? So I'd say, in spite of Eisner, was the driving force? I don't think so. I don't think he was the driving force behind all the good things that happened. I
When
think
Roy
Frank
E.
Wells and
Disney,
Jeffrey Katzenberg were.
but Roy E. Disney picked him. They didn't pick
He picked him at,
Frank.
with Frank Wells as a pair.
Yeah, but that's fine. But that's two people. Why didn't he just pick Frank Wells? That's my point. Why didn't he pick Frank Wells and Jeffrey Katzenberg and let them run the show and take Eisner and say, hit the bricks? Why didn't they? That's because of his successes at Paramount and the leadership that he had there.
And yet, when he was left to his own devices, he did not do well.
And
So I mean, you could argue that he like came in and like saved the company, but he also almost ruined it on his way out. So like it's like we had the Renaissance with these other people in play. When they were gone, it was like horrible. So it's like, so you know, I don't know.
isn't that like a common theme though? Like, who talks about Siskel and Roper? You know, it's always Siskel and Ebert, and it will always be Siskel and Ebert. Like, Eisner and Frank Wells actually was a really good team. It worked. Maybe those guardrails were really important. You know, like a highway needs speed limits, a highway needs police officers, a highway needs, guardrails. It needs traffic lights. It needs all those things to keep you safe. So, uh, you know, but he certainly was a creative person, certainly was an idea person. Was he the best person? I don't know. I still am undecided on that. But I still can say that I don't know if we would have, because the competition I think was really healthy and important for us to get MGM and Animal Kingdom. Like those competition points got us more parks. And I come from a selfish theme park junkie mentality, which is so different
Yeah,
than
I don't know. It all feels really petty to me. So I have issues with it. Like, does the ends justify the means is basically my thing. Like, does it? And to me, I'm like, I know that I have my own personal values are really high on integrity, and how you do things and treating people well is like huge for my personal values. So for me, like, I cannot stand behind somebody who did this, what he did to people. I just can't. I don't care what he did with the parks. I think he made some really poor leadership decisions. So that's, for me, that's like, that's just it. That's cut and dry, and that's just me personally. But
I do
you know,
think he made some real big blunders. The biggest one is probably with Katzenberg. I think he made a horrible mistake in not putting him as president. That was such a, and there's so much politics. You got to remember, 21 years. Like, that's like half my life he was running that company. Do you know what I mean? Like, so
yeah,
when I put that in perspective, like, think about how your kids are maturing and how much changes from the person that you got there for 14 years and then the person that you were for the last, additional what, like 8 years or whatever, right? No, less than that. 6 years. Sorry, my math's awful. Don't listen to my math. But the point is that, like, completely different person, completely different, you know, but also, yet again, put it this way. I don't know if I'm that intrigued enough to wanting to dive into Michael Eisner because I don't view him as a hero to me. I don't. Like, I view Bob Iger more of a hero. I like his leadership style and the
Yeah,
creative
I
direction.
agree.
I've actually read his autobiography and really, really enjoyed it. So, like, I don't really want to learn more about Eisner. Like, this was good enough. And you and I will never see it because you view it as a person thing and I view it as a company thing, and they're just two different perspectives. And
Well,
I don't
yeah.
agree with his personality. I don't think was
Okay.
right.
So this is interesting. Is that Elliot actually? I was talking about this with him, and Elliot, my husband, does a lot of for his living in a college, teaches about the great books and theological things and philosophical things. So he talks a lot about how people argue things is big because he does discussion based learning. So he was saying this is what he wrote to me about it. He said it seemed to me, this is just from what I told him about you. So he, and from some conversations he's had with you. He says, it seems like to me that you have two different ethical frameworks. To me, it sounds like Kirk leans towards utilitarian. Utilitarian, it's okay if you break some eggs as long as people like the end result. The way you decide if an action is good or not is if it creates pleasure for the majority. It's about the outcome and the results. And then he says, for me, like you lean more deontological, which is the deon comes from the Greek meaning for duty. Says you have a duty job to do, you have to do it. Doing your duty is a good thing. It doesn't matter if it makes other people happy. Deontological ethics rely on what your conscience tells you, not an external consensus. It's about the motivating force, a sense of duty or obligation. So that's where mine's like the way you go about it matters. My conscience matters. So he says, he says way more people tend to lean towards utilitarian than deontological because people judge goodness by results rather than the motivating force behind them a lot of the time, which I just think is really interesting insight. So
Yeah, I think I think that's really good insight, and I would agree from this debate's perspective. But I also, me as a person, and
yeah,
like ethics and morals and everything are you
sure.
don't broach those things. And the biggest thing that we don't know is like we didn't work with him. Like, do you know how like when you work with someone, you're like,
Sure.
Steve, I hate Steve. He's the worst, right? Like so. I
Yeah.
mean, we're out of the debate mode. DreamWorks also said that when Jeffrey Katzenberg made Shrek, they made Lord Farquaad to be Michael Eisner.
Yeah.
So if that's
They
really the
really went
truth,
at each
like,
other. They were,
yeah,
it was very public.
you know,
Yeah.
I mean, and I still don't know where the Muffin Man lives, so that's a problem.
No, I think this was like, and this for what Elliot said was in the context of this discussion of like why do
Yeah,
we not agree? I was
and
like
I
I don't
think
understand why we don't agree on this issue, and I'm like I think he's right about this.
I think agreed, but with the caveat, yeah, I have to because you're right. I'm looking at all the accomplishments and all the things, and I'm basically removing myself from Michael Eisner at all and just the people because Michael Eisner, there was a lot of things that he screwed up on and a lot of decisions, but like when you look at a hierarchy, like that dude barely touched anything. Do you know what I mean? Like he might have gotten in through some of the muck and mire of some creative decisions, but like most of the time in a giant bureaucracy, like you're doing nothing. Like you're just walking around and you're like kind of like helping guide decisions. But like if you're really, really good, then you put really, really good people in place and allow them to be successful. And maybe when they started getting flops is when it really, maybe that's when the reign of terror really came in because it was like, we were so much better than this. And I don't
Yeah.
know why we're so bad. Like,
Well,
I'm not
he
sure.
actually, there was a quote in an interview with him where he said that he didn't want to be like all the other CEOs that are just paper pushes at their desks. He wanted to be intimately connected to all of the creative processes, and that's why people called him a micromanager. So from the beginning, he wasn't just like, let the other people do their work. He was very much like, I want to be involved in all the creative decisions. So he was different in that way, in the way that he led. He really just wanted to be hands on for all the things.
I can respect that, except for the fact that he didn't create it, right? Do you know what I mean? Like so, like the
Yeah.
legacy that he was trying to adopt, and that's like a big tenet of your argument is that he's almost trying to become. Walt Disney or a Disney figure when he has no right trying to be any of those, and he should just be himself and allow the company and the IP to run the business and to allow creatives to be creative, and give some direction. But he was like more hands-on and not as likable as he could or should have been. So like
Yeah.
I understand all those things, but also like I recognize too that Walt now it's like coincidentally different, right? Like Walt never wanted to be on camera. He never wanted to be like the forefront,
Yeah.
but somebody had to do it and he
Yeah.
did it. Where completely different with Eisner, where he wanted to be the dude, even though they tested other folks, he was like,
They're
nah,
like, dude,
nah,
don't be the dude. He's like, I'm gonna be the
I am the
dude. Just
dude. I
I
am the
am.
dude. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, different. They're just different. He was not like you know, you can draw any parallels you want to Weld, but just their motivation behind what they did was very, very different from just the character traits that I seem to have picked up on from researching them, you know, and I obviously didn't know them personally, so I can only make so many decisions about that. But from what I pick up, they're just different the way that they acted. And that's, I think, why people wanted him out in the end
Yeah.
because of that.
Yeah.
So,
And now what's unique is once again, we have the benefit of looking back and pausing time and making with knowing the end result, right? So knowing all of the information based on the decision and the environment, there's emotion, there's so many things that happen when you make decisions and and it's so wild to look back at these things and go, I would have done it like this. You're like, would you have though? Would you have not? And there's certain things that obviously, like ethically wise, we agree we would have not done, right? But like other things, like I don't know, some of these decisions were like really exciting to attempt. Like I'm not gonna lie, if Disney did it right and had a really good fast food chain, like I, why couldn't that be successful? Why couldn't that? It totally could. Like, why are you licensing all your stuff to McDonald's when you guys could be McDonald's? You know?
yeah. Yeah. I mean, they could. I think that they could do if they. It'd have to be quality, though. It's all about quality. And the problem is that right now in Disney, everything is the quality is going downhill for a lot of things. Even their merchandise that they're charging more money for is going down in quality, and that's going to be not good for them as a company if they don't catch the fall of quality, because Walt was all about quality and that's what people expect. That's why they're willing to pay more for Disney, is because the quality level of service and quality is so high. And as soon as those start slipping, people are like, why am I paying so much for this? And eventually it just, so it would have to be done in such a way where it was really quality controlled.
We're not in a position of making really creative risks. We're in a position of protection and trying to grow, but yet not reinvesting, and that is a scary thing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there has to be a happy balance of reinvestment and profit taking, and it's a tough balance. And right now we're in the pandemic really jacked the company up, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So it's been really tough. I don't know where this goes. I know how currently people feel, but I wonder how the future of the company. And in my opinion, we're in a position where we need another creative thought leader, idea person in place who's not afraid. I had a GM a long time tell me there's two types of leaders. There's the crazy creative who spends ridiculous amounts of money and is way over budget, but leads us to like new crazy pathways that we never would have went alone. And then there's the logistics based, fiscally frugal, so like and it's almost like yin yang, right?
Yeah.
Like there has to be an ebb and a flow. And you can have both at the same time, right? And that's actually a really happy way to growth, right? Is like
Yeah.
guardrails but with creativity.
Like Walt and Roy, they balanced
Right.
each other
Walton Roy,
perfectly.
great balance, right? And that allowed that to be cohesive. But we're kind of like jumping from one to the other. So,
Yeah, it seems
if
like we
Bob
keep going
Iger,
back and forth. Yeah.
yeah, so like Bob Iger was like our creative, and I'm not saying like one's better than the other. I'm just saying like there's two different archetypes, right? So like you're having like the creative idea with Bob Iger, and then with Chapek, you're getting more of the fiscal logistics, and some of that is built and driven out by what happens 2 years ago, but also like Bob put him as a succession plan. So like we talk about succession plans, like Eisner could have put in some other schmohawk who was just like a yes man to him, and who knows where. Then it would have been like Eisner was like a genius, right? And like Bob Iger left, he left on the come up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just acquired all these things, and there's reasons why Bob did that, but like Pixar, Lucasfilms, Disney Plus, I'm out. Like leave
Yeah.
on the top. And he
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Because
He
like,
did.
where do you go from there?
I mean, that's what I would do if I was going to leave somewhere. Like, leave with them cheering, right? Like, do that. But I feel like it's interesting because would we view Chapek and our current situation the same way if we hadn't gone through what the world went through? You know, how did that mess with everything? Would it be really different? Would we, instead of being talking about all the things Disney's cutting, be talking about the new gate that they're opening? Like, would it have fixed? I don't know. I don't know, because I know also Chapek's background and his vision, and it's, you know, I don't know. I don't. He's very
I
much into luxury travel, so I'm like, eh.
I I think there's becoming like a class division amongst Disney fans, and that's being
Yeah.
corporatized right now, and it's not working in some elements, right? Like let's just say the Halcyon right now is at 25% occupancy. That is an
Not
amazing
shocking.
experience. It's an
Not
amazing
shocking.
experience,
The price is
but
too high.
the price is not, it's not accessible to most people. It really
Mm-hmm.
is not. It took me over a year and a half to save to go on it, and it was unreal. But it's not like I could go back right now if I wanted to, and it's not
No.
that purpose. But yeah, I do feel like there is some sort of division that's happening. But the a good way to go back in history is look at periods like the Great Depression and what companies thrived during the Great Depression. How did they do it? And there's ones that are ethical that did it, and there are ones that are unethical. How did the ethical ones do it? And
Right.
almost all of them spend and reinvest. They keep their employees somehow, and they look for new innovations. They look for new. Say, Disney Plus would not be at the level of subscription if it wasn't for the pandemic.
It's true. Disney Plus
That
really had a huge success there.
they hit
Yeah.
their 5-year subscription goal within 6 months of launch.
Yeah. Yeah. But
That's
that,
not normal.
no, because of everything that happened. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. People were at home. They had a captive audience. Everybody was like desperate for Disney, so it worked out well for them. But yeah, the idea of them. I see that Christina says they're pricing out the average person and making the parks only for the rich. I think that they are trending towards luxury travel. I think that seems to be the current case of the current leadership. Now, will they always stay that way? I don't know. If they change leadership, they might make a change. But it does seem like you get less value for what you do pay for from them having taken away a lot of things that you used to get, which is very sad. Kind of sad that a lot of people who are just even
Well,
middle income families can't go, let alone, low income families. Like it's just
I think
it's very expensive.
I need to know data behind this, but I'll use non-data emotive reasons. Universal and Busch Gardens have really stepped it up for their pass holders and people that are their most devoted fans, and like have created experiences for them that are almost to the level of Disney, you know? And at some point,
Yeah.
if we keep side slipping away from the vision that is truly product based, customer based, does not care about the price, like it's okay to make less money to make more people happy. I actually have
That's
a
what
really
Walt
great
would do.
idea to open a pizza arcade where you can win really good prizes consistently, easier and faster, and like maybe you only have to pay like 2.5 times what the actual price of it versus 300 times what the actual price of it is in tickets. But guess what? People will come back because they
Yeah.
have a great experience and they won something awesome and it was really
Yeah.
fun. So like, I feel like just people have, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. But it'll just be interesting to see how this plays out, and we can look back in Disney history and see, to me, it seems like this Chapek is not, I wouldn't say quite like Eisner, because there was some significant differences in their tenure, so you can't really draw a direct parallel between the two. But if I'd say by the amount of dissatisfaction, I would say that Chapek's time is limited. They're making money by price gouging everybody with Genie Plus, pretty much. But I'd say that I think his time is limited just because eventually people will be priced out, and eventually the dissatisfaction level from the quality going down will eventually come back to haunt them.
It will, you know what'll happen? Once the 50th celebration is done, we'll really truly know how people feel about going to Disney, because there was 2 years where people were not traveling. People said, you know what? Forget it. Let's go. It's the 50th. And the 50th celebration has been extended at nauseum. It's 50th forever, right? We might as well marry Mickey and Minnie. Let's do it.
That'd be a great wedding. I want to go to that.
That was a failed Eisner idea too. They thought about doing it over the course of a year. He was going to get engaged. No. She was going to get all over Valentine's Day.
Forever sweethearts.
They're forever married. Sweethearts, never married. But that was one of his ideas, was to let's marry these two mice. But I think this is where my capitalist heart comes to play, and we all need to vote with our dollars. If people decide that it's not worth it, the experience is not there, they will spend their money elsewhere, and they will do other things. And you could say, well, there's nothing like Disney, until there's another Disney. Until there's somebody who feels like I'm actually in the place where I am respected and appreciated and enjoyed and loved. And the sad thing is it's not the people that work there that feel that way. The cast members are unbelievable. They make magic within their possibilities, because I know they've been limited as well, you know? So I'm super curious as to what's going to happen. But I do believe, there's a lot of people who have bought, well, first of all, you can actually get Universal passes, but a lot of people are going to Universal more and more.
Well, I mean, the fact you can't even buy annual passes or Magic Key holder passes at all in Disneyland or Disney World. Like, I'm like desperately holding on to mine because I'm like, I can still renew, but if I lose them, I can't get it back. I'm like, that's horrifying in itself, you know. But yet they keep coming out. This seems like they've been trying to do a few more things for pass holders recently, like the popcorn bucket, which was like not a great design, but trying to do a few things.
No.
They do a lot more for Magic Key holders. They get a lot more stuff, way more stuff for Magic Key holders than annual pass holders. They get like free posters and special Magic bands and like all kinds of stuff. So they treat, because they know that they're so critical to the, I don't think they can get rid of that program if they wanted to, because the locals won't come if they don't have an annual pass. They're not going to come buy merch and drink and eat. They're like,
it's a locals park. It's a locals park.
Yeah.
Walt Disney World is a destination. Completely different. But that pass holder bucket, give them for free. Give every person who's a pass holder who shows up a popcorn bucket for free.
Probably worth like, what, $3 to make or something like that. You know, it's like, they're not.
No. The amount that they purchased, probably less than 20 cents landed. So 20 cents landed, not even a good looking design. But let's just say 20 cents landed, even if you charged $2 for them. But I think just give them to people for free. They're going to buy popcorn, and then guess what? $2.25 on popcorn pays for the bucket, and it pays for the popcorn. So what are you talking about? They're going to use it.
Yeah.
And now they're happy because they got something for free. What's wrong with you? Give out buckets for free.
It just comes off as very miserly. Like, they could do all kinds of things for pass holders that would cost nothing. Yeah.
Although I did just get a magnet. I think I'm getting another magnet, so I'll get excited.
Oh, I want a magnet. I never get magnets. How come they don't mail them? Like, I know they have mailed them.
They used to.
I've never gotten one in the mail. It's so frustrating. I'm like, there's so many things. Anyway. Well. So.
Anyways, I really genuinely enjoyed diving into this a lot more than I ever would have because it was just interesting in general to study. We were really studying a time period, so it was like a timepiece of leadership, which I've never sat down and really done. And then to look at the scope of what happened in that timeline, you're like, man, the company changed so much in 21 years. It was crazy. So, I just think,
Dramatic changes, yeah.
yeah, it was just, and it was interesting. And you and I are not that far off. Like, honestly, if we just said, like, was Eisner a good dude? Based on everything that you've said, I would go, no, he was not a good dude. But
No.
the things that happened under his leadership, were they good for the company overall, eventually down the line? Forgetting about the
Yeah.
people, things that he
Like,
did. Yeah,
I'm happy we
it
have
was.
Animal Kingdom and Hollywood Studios and
Yeah.
stuff. Of course
Yeah.
I'm happy that Disneyland Paris exists. Do I agree
Hmm.
that he was a great guy making it happen? No.
No, no.
I think we agree with that. So,
Yeah. And I also will say that, like, DreamWorks is not really exactly a great company either. So I think Jeff kind of ran his
yeah,
his course
he
with
did.
his magic was gone after he left Disney, and that could be
Well,
like
they did
because it
Shrek.
got
I think
ruined.
they did like Shrek, and then like after that, it was like downhill.
Shrek
So
was it.
Shrek
Shrek
was
was it.
it.
That's what
They
they
had
had.
they had
They had
Shrek.
Shrek, and then DreamWorks had nothing.
Lindsay, thanks. Lindsay
Train
says
Your
this is one
Dragon,
of
I guess
her
people like.
favorite lives that I've watched of you guys.
Yeah,
That's
we
Lindsay.
don't do debates because, like, for the most part, we just geek out on the same stuff together, and we really don't. This is like the only one that we.
I know. We started to have more
Yeah,
of it.
and
We talked about Pinocchio's pants and we talked about the witch slash old hag. So we debated those in the moment. But that's all we've had. Yeah.
yeah, but I
I have a
think
few other things.
people always like those things. They happen from time to time because
So we don't always
how much.
agree. That's okay.
That's it. Yeah, we for the most part we do, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
So.
it is. No, it's great.
Yeah, so this was probably our longest solo shot episode, and it flew for me. I don't know how
I
everybody
know.
feels, but it flew. I still feel like I didn't get to say everything, but like that's
I
okay.
know.
That's
I
okay.
know.
There's so
But
much, but like we're never gonna have resolution on this beyond. There were some good things, there were some bad things, but overall, the person we agree is not ideal. But things
some
that happened under the leadership were good, even if it was done by other
yeah.
people. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Well, I
So.
think it works. You and I we're friends first, so it's just like we're gonna be friendly, but we also have opinions. So it's a lot of fun to
Yeah.
do this.
Yeah, yeah. To me, it's right because it's a spirited debate about a topic we're really passionate about,
Hmm.
and it's fun to see each other's takes. And I think they were both well researched. I could have came in
Yeah.
here and been real lazy, and
Well,
that
and
would
I
have
could have just
you
said
would have
like he just
mopped the
wasn't a
floor with
good
me,
and like,
and that
well,
wouldn't have been
okay.
enough. Yeah.
No, we have to have some hard facts behind all this, as Disney would say. Walt
Yeah.
Disney would say
I mean, dude,
the hard
there's
facts.
there's a lot of people. Like we held pretty much like 80 to 100 people like all this whole time, which is pretty
Oh,
crazy.
thanks for sticking around, everybody.
Yeah,
That's really
yeah.
fun. I'm getting a lot of comments
We
here
have
that
to.
like they hope we do more debates. So we're gonna maybe I
Yeah,
have
we
to
have to do
weave
more
them in here.
fisticuffs.
I know.
Well, I know people really enjoyed when I did Tiki Room Radio, which was basically just a debate show with like a small little context in there. So, that was really fun because people like hearing me argue with Mark. So,
Yes.
what's the difference? I think people like this one better because, yeah, I don't know. They're different. They're very different. Mark and you are very different people. So,
Wait, what?
oh, thank you, Brandon, for the dancer, the air dancer.
This
Mel,
always
by
reminds me
the
of the Mickey Bar ghost in the Haunted Mansion when you do that.
By the way, Mel was with me during Busch Garden stream today, and oh my gosh, she saw the antics in full force when people were doing the air dancers, and like there's like all these people around you, and she's like laughing hysterically as like people are like giving me looks, and she's like, "This is what happens, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, it just doesn't really matter. It doesn't faze me, you know." So
You're like, probably never see it again. It's fine. It's fine.
mm-hmm.
They like the construction paper hats for future debates. Okay. Noted.
Don't be a miser. Vote for Eisner.
Like, my won't stick. I need like better tape. It's like my old notes from when we started doing Haunted Mansion, still sitting here because I haven't cleaned my desk. So, Michael for life. Reminds me of like Tiki Bird, Michael.
Yeah, well,
Can't get it to
not
stick.
as good. Not as good. I do my best one though was this one. Hang on, let me. I like that I had all these different ones that I could just fold and change.
It's so distracting. I'm like, I can't.
Don't be a miser. Vote for Eisner. It doesn't even make sense, like in the terms of his leadership, but it rhymed, so it worked.
Michael from The Office. There's a lot of Michaels out there. Yeah. Yeah. Vote for. No. 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 No vote for Eisner over here. But yes, I'll
Yeah.
concede. I'm happy
It
that
was
we
a
have.
fun. It was a fun night.
Yeah. I'm like, do we ask them who won? I was like, I think it's okay that we kind of both won in our own way. I think we're good. We both made our points. I think we both have a point. I think we're both
Yeah.
equally as right,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah, I think both sides are actually probably accurate.
Yeah.
Because at not one point did I go, I think Michael Eisner is the greatest human and the nicest person and did things that were ethical along the entire way. Not once would I ever make that argument because I don't agree with that.
And I do like Disney Cruise Line. I don't really have much to say about that. So
Yeah.
they're really expensive. But
Well, shocking.
yeah.
I've never been on a cruise ever in my life, and my mother-in-law was like, when the girls, I'm gonna pay for the girls and for my nephews, and everybody's gonna go together. And I was like, you selling your house? Because like you need like 20 grand to do that.
That's so much money.
Yeah, it's too
I was gonna
much.
say, in case you want to go to Northern European next, in September of next year, we could all be on the same cruise ship. You can save up for that.
Yeah,
No, it's
Yeah.
a gift for us, so there's no way I could afford it myself. So it's definitely being gifted to us, or we wouldn't be going. But my kids
Yep.
don't know, so I'm gonna have to find a way to tell them on Christmas. We're gonna tell them about it. They've been
That's
asking
gonna
to
be
go on the
awesome.
Mickey boat for a really long time, so they're gonna be. I just keep telling them we can't afford it. Like it's not in the car, it's not in the budget. Like I just keep saying that, so they don't know. It'll be fun.
The old bait and switch. I would say that's very Eisner of you to go an unethical way to lie to people to get what you want.
I feel like Christmas surprises are not lying. Come on now, like that's surprising. That would be like Victoria not telling me what was in that box was like omission of the truth. Like, but now we have.
Well, you called them sticks.
Okay,
They,
I couldn't tell what they were. They
were
were
they
bubble wrap.
sticks? Were they
Sticks.
sticks?
You won't let it go.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
I love him. He's so cool.
so
Thank you so
great.
much again. This
Yes,
is
thank
amazing.
you.
Yeah. You know what? I'm big on visualizing what the future is, but I don't know when it'll happen. So like I envision what the office will look like with these things, but I don't know when.
You like Waltz, have them on the shelf behind you, all the little
Yeah,
things.
heck yeah.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's special. Well, this was super fun. So next week, just so you guys know, we will not have live Distory, but we'll have a premiere of Disney Christmas Parade's Distory that we recorded yesterday. Is that yesterday? Feels like a week
Yeah.
ago. We recorded yesterday. So we'll have that on the podcast and also as a YouTube premiere, so you can go and chat and hang out at the same time next Friday, 5:30 Pacific or 8:30 Eastern. But I will be in Disneyland next week. So I'll be doing some lives from there, including my 1955 Disneyland challenge. We'll live like it's 1955 in Disneyland and eat like it's 1955 and have a good time. So that'll be November 15th, Tuesday, November 15th. If you want to join me on live here on TikTok, that would be super fun. And I'll just go live also throughout the week to show you guys some Christmas things. I think I'm going to do the Sip and Savor Pass for the Food in California adventure. You're doing some food too, right, on Monday? Is that right?
Yeah, so I cleared Monday of Carpe Diems just so you and I, if you wanted to, we could link up and we could do side by side lives because I figured that would be cool.
Okay. I think I fly in on Monday, so it won't be till the afternoon probably
Yeah.
because I have an early morning flight. So
Yeah.
I'll let you know. Maybe we can figure out what time. But that would be really fun to eat together while apart.
Have a bite. There
I
you
know,
go.
like, will they share it? Wait, it's this way. It
Thank
sounded
you.
so weird. You know what I meant.
I know what you mean.
But you guys, and Epcot doesn't have any sort of Sip and Savor pass. I think they're just all individual, yeah.
Yep, we don't have any of that.
So
But we have all the holiday stuff is now, well, not everywhere, but Hollywood studios where I'm definitely hanging out in studios for a time.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I can hang out in either because I can just walk across the plaza. So we'll be wherever. It'll be great.
If only Eisner made a better transportation system.
I don't know why Eisner did not. Why did they not plan a monorail stop at DCA? I will never know for the life of me. The monorail goes through the park and through California Adventure, like the Grand Californian, but there's no monorail stop there. And I was like, who designed this? Like, figure it out.
Makes no
Crazy.
sense.
It's crazy. Yeah. I know, but it would be really great. Yeah. So we'll hang out a little bit.
Yeah,
Speak
we'll
live.
find out and we'll figure out what makes sense and we'll try to tie in some good stuff that we can do side by side. That would be fun.
Yeah, that'll be really fun.
Are you gonna buy that reindeer sipper with the big old long tongue? It's
I
expensive.
don't know. Yeah,
And like
money.
plus you gotta put it in your luggage.
I know.
Maybe just you know what's
I'm
good
flying
enough is
Southwest home, so I can.
just take a picture next to it. That's good enough. You don't need to buy
Yeah,
it. Just
yeah.
go like this,
Maybe
like
I'll do
hold
that.
it and be like,
Okay, that's what I'll do. It'll be
there
great.
you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll hit you up and we'll figure out what we're doing. But thank you again to everybody for doing something different with a Distory debate. We never ever do these, but
I
we
know.
always disagree. So great. Just kidding. It's not like that. But yeah. Well, listen, you get packed and all that good stuff, and I'll hit you up and catch you on Monday.
It sounds great.
And thank
Thank
you
you
everybody
everybody for.
for hanging. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. This was so fun to see all of you guys' comments too about adding into this discussion, and how you were seeing us react to each other's comments was great too. So appreciate all of you guys hanging in there for kind of an extra long history, but a really fun topic about Michael Eisner. We really appreciate you guys being here, being part of the community. And as always, if you're not part of our Pocket Fam Walrus Carb Discord, there's a link in our bio for that, so you can chat with us anytime, ask us questions, have show ideas if you have that. You know, anything you want to contribute, we'll be there. And we do appreciate all of you guys so much for being here. So thank you, and I'll see you in a couple days in Disneyland. So it'll be great.
And I will see you at another time.
In Disney World.
All right.
Okay.
I'll see you guys.
Bye. Have a great night, everyone.
Have a good weekend. Oh, she disconnected before I could.